as the most disturbingly efficient murderer in the animal kingdom. Here, we see a robin rip a worm out of the ground with no moral hesitation whatsoever. This atrocity is but one in a series of cold-blooded murders this bird will commit in a single day. Although feces-fueled worms are themselves one of the most disgusting of all animals, the robin's cruelty remains indefensible. Some apologists might argue that robins need to eat worms to survive, but worms are capable of regeneration. So robins could satiate themselves on fractions of individual worms and leave the rest. But it does not. Unequivocal evidence of the robin's bloodlust.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. As always, you're invited to join us, 603-283-6160, if you want to do that. Again, that's 603-283-6160. And with you in the studio tonight, it's Aria,
Nikki, and it's Bonnie.
And forgive me if we have any weird miscellaneous issues. There was a reformat done on the main studio computer here. It's been crashing, and that forced us, of course, to update to Windows 11, and I hate Windows 11 so much. Look,
so does Ian.
And I can't blame him. I don't understand what Microsoft's problem is, right? Like this, it seems like they're just hell-bent on every other operating system. They just have to make it absolutely terrible, right? Like Windows XP was great. Rock solid operating system. Windows Vista came out, and Windows Vista, to be fair, after the first service pack, which is like the first major patch, so to speak, it was actually, I think Vista only got the one service pack. I don't remember now. That was, 20 years ago, 15 years ago.
Was that like an update?
Yes. And after that, it was great. Vista's issue really was that it released on hardware at the time that wasn't good enough to support it. Like it required Windows 7 levels of hardware, like 3 gigabytes of RAM, dual core CPUs, and that kind of stuff. But when it first released, people were putting it on like 512 megabytes of RAM with single core weak processors.
Yeah, so it's just not going to work out.
Yeah, they were putting it on inferior hardware that, yeah, I mean, if you put Windows XP on that, it would be fine. But if you put Windows 7 on that, it's also going to run like crap. And Vista got blamed for that. I mean, Vista also had its own problems. Don't get me wrong. It really did. But once that first service pack came out, it really cleaned up. And it was probably my favorite operating system that I've ever used. Then, of course, there was Windows 8, and I don't know if either of you ever used Windows 8.
I have never used Windows, period. Only, like,
really?
at work.
Wow.
I've never...
I've always remember. Like, when I was a little kid, I wasn't like, what operating system is this? I was just like, how to get to Neopets.
I don't know. I guess my family computer, like, when I was a little kid, had Windows, but I always had either, like, MacBooks, and then I started using Linux.
See, I had to know what operating system we were using because I wanted to install this program or that game or use this sound card or whatever, which you got to know what operating system you're running. So that's why I knew, I guess. But Windows 8 was the one where they got rid of the start button. And they were like...
Oh, yeah. No, I remember this.
That was terrible, right? But
and there's like this big thing that basically like wants you to go buy apps.
Yes.
I hate that too. That's 8.
That was 8 where they introduced that. However, some enterprising individuals were like, hey, this sucks and we're going to make it better. So they made this thing called Classic Shell, which I skipped over Windows 7, didn't I? I did. Windows 7 was great. Everyone loved Windows 7. Moving on. Windows 8 sucked. But these people made Classic Shell and it made it function very, very much like Windows 7 and it made it usable. I still preferred to just use Windows 7 because, like, why update to Windows 8? And then install this thing to make it like Windows 7?
Yeah, it doesn't really make sense.
When you could just continue using Windows 7.
But doesn't it cause the issues that we're like having, wrecking issues on this computer to like keep an old one on? Isn't that why Ian had to make it Windows 11 or whatever?
We're not entirely sure why it was breaking or why it was blue screening because it gave us different error messages each time. That's like a shotgun approach, like a scatter shot approach. Like we're going to completely nuke everything, and that's going to kill the spider in the house. Right? We're going to burn the house down, and that will for sure kill the spider. And that was more or less what was going on here. It's like, why spend 5 hours a day over the next week, diagnosing this weird little software or possibly a hardware issue. If it's hardware, of course, it will carry on. But anyway.
It keeps turning down
What do you mean?
microphone 3 from like the
Oh, really?
settings. Not just like
That's like weird.
from the board, but
Right.
from the settings by itself.
Oh, maybe it's a ghost.
That's odd.
I was like, Ian, you need to tell whoever's doing this to freaking stop because it's messing up. And he was
What, you
like,
think it's
no
like a
one would do
hacker?
that. No, I thought that it was one of the first chair people doing something.
Yeah, like
And-
I don't like the third chair host tonight, so I'm just gonna like slowly turn their mic
Or
down.
I don't know that it was like convenient for them for some reason, but Ian was like, no, listen, there is no reason somebody would do that.
It's totally
It's
a ghost.
just doing it.
Yeah, because to do that, you have to go into the audio settings
Yeah.
and find the microphone.
I had
and turn
no
that down.
clue
Yeah.
how to fix it. Ian had to do it because whenever I record my audiobook for Alu's book, Presumed Guilty, I use this microphone 3, and sometimes I can see on the screen, it's just like, why is
It's
the
so strange that it would do that.
the little zigzag that appears when I speak is
Right.
just little, no matter, because I have a little piece of tape on the board that shows me exactly where I keep my levels on the board.
Yeah, so it's the same every time.
Yeah. Anyways, it's a ghost.
That's strange. Yeah, it must be. That's the only explanation.
So then there was Windows 9 that got skipped over for some reason. And then there was Windows 10, which is the one that most people are familiar with. It's the darker one, and it works really well. And I've liked Windows 10. I've enjoyed it. It's not the best I've ever used because if you need to do admin stuff, it makes it a little bit difficult for you to do that. Like on Windows 7, I think, if you right-click the start button and you went to settings, it took you to your control panel. But on Windows 10, it takes you to this sort of user-friendly kind of settings thing where you can change some stuff, but you can't really get in there under the hood and change the things that someone like me would need to actually change unless you
Does
actually...
it have the start thing?
It does, but it's modified. But it's all usable.
So what did they do with the start thing? Like, what did they replace it with?
Well, with Windows 11, they replaced it with... I don't know what they call it, but it's very similar to Windows 8 where you just have like this grid of icons in the center of your
Yeah.
screen, and you click one of those to launch whatever tool you're looking for. But like more often than not, when I'm sitting down at my computer, I don't need to launch a program. I just need a file explorer, definitely. Or
And it doesn't have one for File Explorer?
I don't know. I assume it's
It
probably
would
got an
have
icon
to.
for File Explorer. Well,
I remember my sister in like high school got a laptop and it had all that. And it was the first time I had ever seen it. And neither one of us really liked it, but we also aren't computing.
So that's
We're
kind
like-
of how like Mac.
That's
runs.
exactly it. Is that
Yeah.
from what I can tell of Windows 11, they're doing everything they can to make it more similar to Mac,
But
which is
I don't
a
know why
problem
they
for
would
me.
do that though, because people who run Windows like Windows. Like
Right.
if they wanted an Apple computer, they would buy an Apple computer. And let me tell you, Apple computers suck. So that's why
Well, I don't know.
that's why
I'm not a fan, but plenty of people are.
I mean, I love how they run, but what was my issue was they're very, very expensive and they break. So
Right.
the hardware itself is the issue. I love the operating system. I actually took my Linux and I essentially I made it look exactly like an Apple computer.
Yeah, because you can do
Because-
that with Linux. That's
which
one
is-
of the
which
few
is
things I
nice.
like about it.
Because I basically wanted a MacBook, but they're too expensive and they keep breaking. So I created my own MacBook with Linux.
I definitely think that Mac, and I've only ever used it in schools, was like the prettiest. Like everything
Yeah.
looks so nice on it. But I just think since like elementary school, I was like trained on computers that were Windows. And also like my family computer was always Windows. I think that I just have that preference because it's like more intuitive for me. But if you got trained on a different one, then
See,
you're on that one.
maybe that's why I always kind of liked Mac, because that's what we had in school.
You had Macs at your school? Where did
Yeah.
you go?
I had Macs in my school starting in like middle school, but maybe more like my last year of middle school. But before that, like elementary school was always Windows. And so that's what I got like trained on.
I don't know.
I'm dating myself a little bit here, but we didn't have computers until like junior high, maybe. There wasn't even a single computer in every classroom.
What year did you
until I
graduate?
think-
Well, you don't have to
I didn't. I
say.
dropped out.
Well, what?
But yeah, I wouldn't answer that anyway.
Okay.
By the time I graduated, there were computers in every classroom, at least one in every classroom,
So when I
but
started,
no Macs.
when I started school, because I started in third grade, that had to have been 2006 or 2005. And there was computers in there. They were always Windows. We got taught how to use like Paint, PowerPoint.
I also grew up on Windows though, and I've had a few clients who like preferred Mac and they used Macs. Like the Tate County Democrat was one of my clients, and they all ran Mac. Everything in their office was Mac except the printers, which worked well with Macs. I don't remember what the printers were, but I hated that client. And they were all nice. They were all super friendly. And I would tell them, I'm like, look, I'm not an Apple person. I can make it do what you need it to do, but like, I'm not the one you want for this. And ultimately I got that through to their heads because I was doing a terrible job. Because like, this is not what I do. I don't mess with Mac. And we here and there we had clients over the next few years we have this one employee who prefers Mac and they use Mac, so you'd have to figure out how to make the Mac work with all the Windows computers, and it's just a nightmare. And sitting down at one of these things to try to make it do what I want it to do, it's like if you hand me your iPhone right now and you unlock it, it's like, hey, here, find out all of my secrets. And I would not even know where to begin in trying to make it do what I wanted it to do.
There's a lady, an older lady from Massachusetts, and she's really nice, who comes to our crypto meetups needing help a lot. And she only has MacBooks, and all of the computer wizards in the room are like, try clicking on this. And they're just looking for the most basic thing, like settings. And
so
I don't know how to help them because I only have an iPhone and it's different.
Yeah. It's so funny because to me it's so intuitive because I've always used them. And the reason why I was locked into Mac and Apple products for so long is because they're all compatible, right? So it's like, okay, if I wanted, and that's why I avoided replacing my laptop for so long because I really wanted another computer, but it was so easy to just airdrop things. And like my life was so much simpler when I had all Apple products. But it's just...
Why doesn't Windows have a phone, kind?
Well, they did.
Oh.
And that was
they
the
still
reason.
do, right?
I don't know.
I thought they still
It wasn't
did.
very popular and successful. It was like the BlackBerry, really. It's like it had its day, but I'm not sure the Windows phone was ever as popular as BlackBerry.
What was it called? Just Windows phone?
That was the operating system. Windows Mobile, I think, was what they called it, but it was not popular. And that was why they produced Windows 8. They wanted a single operating system that would work on Xbox, Windows Phone, and computers. And like those are three very different devices used for very different things. It's stupid to try to have one operating system running all of them. So eventually they realized, gosh, that was really stupid of us, wasn't it? But it looks like this Windows 11 thing sort of is trying to be more like it was when Windows 8 and everyone hated it. Now, what frustrated me is that my laptop recently automatically updated to Windows 11. Now, this is frustrating to me for a number of reasons, but one of which is that the laptop is it's inconvenient to me because it's currently in my music studio. It's inconvenient to me to have to reboot this laptop. It's so much easier to just leave it on all the time and let it go to sleep as needed. But when this update happened, it rebooted, and then it has to reboot several times, and it's encrypted. So every single time I have to enter this gargantuan 68-character password, and it makes me want to put my fist through it. And then, of course, it updated to Windows 11, and I had gone through repeatedly and turned off Windows updates. Now, this is not something you, average person out there, probably needs to do, but as a tech person who's like doing a bunch of stuff, it can be very important to turn off Windows Update because I've done IT work before and I can tell you it breaks things fairly often. Antivirus updates and Microsoft Windows updates, they break stuff all the time. And so I wanted to disable it. So I went into services like we used to do and just disabled it. Everything was fine. But no, it undisabled itself.
That is terrible.
It is. And I got to think it's got to be some kind of violation,
it's
right?
A ghost.
It has to be.
Like
I love how that's just our answer tonight. We're like, it has to be a ghost. That's the only explanation.
That's crazy that it can undisable itself. That just sounds like a ghost.
It is because, like, with Windows, one of the more it's not Linux, right? There is an end user license agreement, and you are sort of you're not really restricted in what you can and can't do to it because Windows is very open in that regard. But it feels un-Windows to me that that updates would re-enable themselves.
Wait, so yours is a Linux running something that looks like Windows?
No,
because that's what mine is.
Right, you're probably running Windows Mint, I would guess. I had a laptop that was running not Windows Mint, Linux Mint.
Oh, okay.
So I had a laptop that was running Mint.
It's not Mint. I don't know. I can't remember now. No, I think that if
Doesn't that one look like Windows?
if it's a Kubuntu, it's like one of those with a qualifier. I don't remember what it's called.
So yeah, I'm not running any Linux at the moment. But anyway, I disabled Windows updates. It re-enabled itself. So I looked online. I was like, well, what can I do? So here's a registry hack. You can do that. I was like, all right, I did that. Well, that wiped itself out too. So finally they were like, okay, well, go in and tell it to go deep into the back end and be like, you load in with this login and this password and make sure the password and login don't work. That way it can't actually run that particular service. Well, it undid that too. And eventually it updated and installed Windows 11. And now I hate my laptop. But there's good news, right? Like, I asked my attorney a few weeks ago because we had been kicking this back and forth with the prosecutors. For those who don't know, somehow, like in March of 2021, I was arrested along with 5 others and charged with operating an unlicensed money transmitting business. I didn't take a plea deal, and they ultimately brought more charges against me. Ian went to trial. I ended up taking a plea deal and pled guilty to operating an unlicensed money transmitting business and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, they have a bunch of my stuff from when they raided me. Among those things is my studio PC and an external hard drive that had all of my stuff from Bad Movie Club, which is where some friends and I recorded ourselves watching really bad movies like Ice Spiders and Sharkasaw, Women's Prison Massacre.
Like, what is that show called? Mystery Science Theater or something like that?
I don't know because I've never seen that.
Oh, it's great.
But movies like Thanksgiving and Killer Raccoons 2, Dark Christmas in the Dark. Really bad, stupid movies, right? But they were so much fun to watch. So we recorded ourselves and we would make videos of it and we put them on the internet, whatever. And it was my studio PC, so it had all my music on it as well. And my attorney and I have been fighting for about a year now to get those things back because they're completely useless to this case. They've never touched cryptocurrency. They were never used for cryptocurrency. It literally just sat there in my studio being used to record songs, record videos, edit songs, and all of that stuff. Well, I'm finally getting that stuff back.
Oh, good.
So
Nice.
I won't have to use this horrible Windows 11 laptop. I say it's it's like a $900 laptop, right? It's a good laptop, but now it's running Windows 11, and that makes it garbage.
Is 11 the most recent?
It is.
That's crazy that you can't backdate. Like, you can't go
I
back
probably
to...
can, but that requires reformatting the hard drive,
Yeah.
which is going to have me lose all of my settings and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, that's tedious in and of itself. And I can skip all of that. And then it's just going to do it again, right? Like, how do I make it not do this? Like with Linux, it's my device. If I tell it to update, then it will update. And if I tell it not to update, it won't update. And that's always been the case with Windows as well. And I know Microsoft's not Linux, right? Windows is not Linux, and they're not going to recognize my wishes in regard to this. But one of the reasons I've always made arguments for Windows is that even though they have these user license agreements and all this crap that gives them the right to go in and turn updates back on, they've always respected the PC owner's right to control their PC. But this automatic updating crap, this forced updating crap, it goes very much against that.
Even iPhone doesn't do that. My phone was starting to suck and get really slow, so I just was finally like, oh, let it update, because I didn't want it to update to the update. I forget which number it was, and it was several updates behind that was going to search my phone for child porn. Yeah, there's
I remember that, where it would automatically upload your pictures to the cloud, and it would search them for child pornography.
Yeah, like alert the cops. It's not like
it sounds like a good idea. Look,
but they always make it sound like that. They're like, oh, no, it's just to save the children.
It makes it sound weird that one would not want them to do that, as if like, I don't want them to find the child porn on my phone.
I don't want them data mining my pictures. That's all there is to it.
I don't want them to be able to use any excuse to alert the cops to my phone. It could be a picture of, okay, I searched dog. This is going to make people who are mean to me laugh. I searched dog in my phone pictures the other day because I was looking for a specific picture of coconut. And like half of the pictures were pictures of me, just my face. So it's like this, whatever.
I was wondering where you were going with this when you said the haters would like it. So I was like, what? Okay.
All of the algorithm that it's going to use to be looking for child porn is going to be like, this is child porn, this is child porn. That's a dog. It's me.
It's like that. Yeah, you're like, that's just me.
Like, oh my God. Lots of funny things pop up.
So it's like the Facebook algorithm, I guess, where it's like it tries, but it's got a lot of false positives, and then some human goes through and does the final check. And
yeah, sometimes they'll just make its own category and be like, you might want to see this album we made of birds. And it'll be like my old dog Schnitzel, who's a poodle.
Well, A for effort, I guess. They
Yeah.
tried, right? Well, in other news today, speaking of dogs, now this is something that I've been wanting. I've had it in my show prep for quite a while, and there was just not much room. I mean, it's not like newsworthy. It's not really show worthy, but we're almost done with this segment, and the story is incredibly fascinating. Colorado driver tried to avoid a DUI by switching seats with his dog.
Yeah,
Did it work?
he definitely wasn't drunk.
No, he had to have been hammered, right?
Did it work?
Like the dog was driving.
A speeding driver was pulled over in Colorado, and he tried to switch seats with his dog to evade arrest. An officer approached the car and watched the bizarre scene unfold. The man was initially stopped for speeding at 52 in a 30-mile-per-hour zone. He was also intoxicated. The driver then attempted to switch places with his dog. As the SPD officer approached and watched the entire process, the man also claimed he was not driving.
Wait, the officer watched him switch places with his dog too?
Yes.
So it's not even like the officer hadn't gotten to the window yet?
Is it at least a service dog?
It doesn't say what type of dog it is, but yes, the officer
Oh, I hope it's
watched
like a
this
chihuahua.
entire thing happen.
They couldn't even reach.
Officer, this is my service dog. It drives for me.
The man also claimed that he was not driving the vehicle and then attempted to run away when he was asked about his alcohol consumption. Obviously, he didn't make it very far.
Oh, God. Tried to drive away.
Police said the man, who has not been named, was arrested within 20 yards of the car and charged with driving under the influence, resisting arrest, and speeding. He was taken to the hospital before being sent to jail. It doesn't say why he was sent to the hospital first.
He's
He
probably
might
just
have
that
been,
drunk.
yeah, depending on what he blew, then
Really?
they might have to, yeah, if he was that intoxicated that he thought they would fall for the dog driving, he might have to go to the hospital.
Well, we spent some time during one of the rallies at Central Square that we did, the nightcaps. That's what I was looking for. We did some cop blocking one night where these college kids forgot to turn on their headlights as they were driving back to their house or
Which
whatever.
is easy to do when there's a bunch of street lamps.
It is. Keene is very well lit.
Yeah.
I've done it everywhere I've lived. Not being drunk. Just being like, it's dark. Oh, God. And then I realized and totally sober. Like, I do it all the time.
Well, these guys were
You don't have to be
definitely
sober.
drunk.
I mean, you don't have to be drunk.
And one of them was so drunk that he was vomiting out of the passenger seat into the street, right? Like he was drunk. Like
Gross.
Not even trying to hide it.
Well, I mean, he was a passenger, so I guess he didn't really have to,
Yeah,
right? But
I guess so.
The driver also got arrested. I think the passenger also got arrested, but maybe that was just for his own benefit. Anyway, this dude was like vomiting out in the street, and I was like, no, you need to get this guy some water before he dies, right? This is what I was telling the cops. And they're like, well, if he wants water, he'll ask for it. I was like, oh, okay. Like George Floyd asked for air, I guess. Is that the game we're going to play here? Like, this dude's literally drunk and vomiting in the street, man. Get him a bottle of water. He's like, we'll get him some water back at the police station. Dude, he might be dead by then.
Maybe that cop has ODD, oppositional defiance disorder. You just told him to, so he didn't want to.
But he's watching this human being vomit in the street.
No one ever said cops had sympathy, empathy.
Well, they should have to have empathy to be cops. Obviously,
No, they have to
don't.
have a low IQ.
As for the dog, though, police did not name either. The animal was given to the driver's acquaintance to take care of while his owner serves his time in jail. The dog does not face any charges and was let go with just a warning. So at least they have a sense of humor if they don't have empathy. There's more coming up here, 603-283-6160.
When New Hampshire peacefully leaves the Union, will we have to take on some of the national debt? Let's be clear, that's not national debt, that's federal debt. Debt that was incurred by a bunch of people that we didn't elect, forcing policies on us that we didn't want, and 2.5 million unelected federal bureaucrats. According to Professor Matt Quartrup from Coventry University and the foremost expert on independence referenda, the rule in international law is that political divorce is not like domestic divorce in that there is no alimony due and no obligation to pay the debt incurred by the larger organization. New Hampshire's government is a paragon of fiscal responsibility compared to the United States federal government. We didn't create the national debt, we didn't consent to it, and when we declare peaceful independence, New Hampshire will not owe a single solitary dime of federal debt. You can learn more about how we can peacefully divorce D.C. at NHindependence.org and join the movement at NHexit.us.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. The New York Police Department is investigating after Britain's Prince Harry and his wife Meghan claimed they were involved in a near-catastrophic car chase. The couple say they were pursued by paparazzi photographers for more than 2 hours in New York City. FSN's Sally Patterson reports from New York.
A series of paparazzi cars, around half a dozen cars with blacked out windows and motorbike scooters, were all pursuing the couple around the streets of New York City. We're hearing from their spokesperson that this lasted for 2 hours, this chase going on, and they said there was a series of near accidents. But we do understand that there was no actual car crash, there was no collision. They did have Meghan Markle's mother with them as well, though their 2 children were not in the car.
US President Joe Biden says a deal on raising the debt ceiling won't happen until he returns from his trip to Japan for the G7 summit. Biden spoke to reporters before he left Washington on Wednesday morning. He said he plans to hold a press conference on his return on Sunday. He's cancelled the Australia leg of his trip to continue negotiations on trying to raise the US's borrowing limit by June the 1st to prevent an unprecedented default.
I'll be in constant contact with my team while I'm at the G7. Now, what I have done, in anticipation that we won't get it all done till I get back, is I've cut my trip short in order to be for the final negotiations and sign the deal with the majority leader.
Disgraced tech founder Elizabeth Holmes has lost her appeal to delay serving her 11-year prison sentence. Holmes was convicted on fraud and conspiracy charges over her company's false claims to investors about its blood testing technology. FSN Silicon Valley correspondent Ira Spitzer has more.
A San Francisco appeals court rejected a motion from Elizabeth Holmes' lawyers asking that the 39-year-old mother of 2 be allowed to remain free on bail while she appeals her conviction. In November, a judge sentenced Holmes to 11 years over fraud related to Theranos' blood testing technology that didn't do what she claimed. In a separate decision, the judge also ordered Holmes and Theranos co-founder Sunny Balwani to repay $452 million to investors. Balwani is already serving a 13-year prison sentence. Before Theranos was exposed, Holmes was able to raise close to $1 billion from a number of high-profile investors, including media mogul Rupert Murdoch and Oracle co-founder Larry Ellison. Ira Spitzer, San Francisco.
The former French president Nicolas Sarkozy has lost his appeal against his conviction for influence peddling and corruption. The decision means that his original sentence of 3 years in jail, with 2 years suspended, will stand, though the ex-president's legal team says they will launch a new appeal in the country's highest court. From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, and you are invited to join us. 603-283-6160 if you want to do that. That's 603-283-6160. With you in the studio tonight, it's Aria,
Nikki, and it's Bonnie.
And coming up, is the war in Ukraine possibly coming to an end? I don't know, but Putin and Zelensky apparently have agreed to a summit where they will begin to talk about some sort of plan.
Have they ever been at a summit together?
I'm sure.
Probably, just not since the war started.
That's what I meant, since the war started. Because I was looking into have they ever done peace talks? Because this guy on Twitter was arguing with me about it.
No, they both always have refused to. Zelensky in particular has said repeatedly that he would not.
But I got fact check corrected on it, and I believe the same thing. But their aides have gone and had peace talks together. They've just gone nowhere. And Zelensky has multiple times said there will be no peace talks. So he's trying to say there will be no more, which seems weird. So it did confuse me when I was looking this up. Apparently there have been peace talks, but only, what am I trying to say? Only with their aides there, and they went nowhere. No agreements have been made.
Well, I would expect them to go nowhere because Zelensky doesn't want peace, and neither does Putin. Yeah. But they are agreeing now to a summit. Now, the summit hasn't happened yet, and it's as far as I know, they haven't actually even planned a date. But they have agreed to a summit to discuss a plan to ultimately end the war in Ukraine, and that would be good. I'm not going to get my hopes up, though, because they do like war. Zelensky and Putin and the United States government and the European powers. It would be good for, the world, for these people to stop fighting one another, but I don't think they're going to. It would be better for people if Putin and Zelensky would just get into a boxing ring and just beat the crap out of each other. But they're not going to do that.
I mean, if they're going to fight, if they're going to be violent, they might as well just, settle it the old-fashioned way. That's how they did it in ancient times, right? Just, I challenge you to a duel.
I feel like just looking at them, it wouldn't even be fair.
No, Putin would beat the crap out of Zelensky.
I think I would love to see that.
I would too. It would be great. I mean, as long as they both did it consensually, right? And they voluntarily agreed to do this. I would love to watch just Putin beat the crap out of Zelensky. I mean, it's not that I'm pulling for Putin or anything like that, but I'm realistic.
It would just
and I know
funny.
that Putin,
Zelensky's really short. He only has, makeup muscles.
What are makeup muscles?
It's girls decorate themselves with makeup and painting their nails. Boys decorate themselves with muscles, but they're not actually strong. They're just building muscle, don't actually know how to use them type of thing.
Yeah, like steroids.
Yeah.
Also coming up, it is Wednesday, so was Jesus black? I have a story about that. A stained glass window shows Jesus Christ with dark skin, stirring questions about race in New England.
This is old news, though, right?
In New England?
He was from he was Middle Eastern.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's in the news now, so I mean, it's being discussed again. But
wait, so
it depends on who you ask, right?
But that's the thing. All of the American Christians, for the most part, are you look at the pictures on their wall. Look at the wall art. He's white.
Americans are convinced that Jesus was a white American-looking dude. They are fully convinced of that.
Well,
that just doesn't make sense, though.
I don't even want to get into it, but did you say that it was found in New England? Because that makes it a lot weirder.
In Rhode Island, I'm not sure exactly where it was found.
You didn't know Jesus was from Rhode Island?
No, it's just the people who came here originally and they were worshiping Jesus. Their Jesus was black, because that'd be kind of interesting.
It was Rhode Island.
Weird.
Where this was found. So that's coming up.
And why is it found? Was it buried underground in Rhode Island?
I was just teasing the story, man.
We have a lot of questions.
And we'll get into that. But first, we do have Ricky on the line from Pennsylvania. Ricky, you're on Free Talk Live.
Thank you there, Sister Aria, Sister Bonnie, Sister Nikki. Good evening.
Yeah, what's on your mind tonight?
Well, I'm going to try to rip through this as quick as possible. And bear with me. I'll make it quick as I can. Now, one thing I mentioned before I even start is when it came to Windows 10 for PC or Windows 10 for phone, both of them were from the very first line of code. They were brand new. That's one point. Now, here's how this goes. For a year and a half before Build 10.240, which came out July 23rd of 2015, I worked as a Windows Insider for free, yes, but I was a beta tester. And what I did was I helped coders to clean code. What that means is you lay down code, you put in a button or a feature. Well, that works, but then if you lay down more code, it breaks it. So I would utilize workarounds, knowing knowledge of the operating system and things like that to get back in and then report based on the build. Now, one thing about Windows 10 that was unique, whether it be the phone version or the PC version, at the code base level, they were identical. Now, there is things specific to the PC that you wouldn't have on the phone, but they were identical. So when I was doing things like this and they were fixing stuff, they would fix the same exact feature after that on the PC. So let's move on. Now, a neat little trick, that being said, is something that no other operating system could ever do. So one thing they did after the phone release of 10, which was in November of 15, it was going into 16. They had a new Tomb Raider game was one of them. And you bought, say, the PC version, they give you the mobile version for free, and you could use it on the Surface or the phone. Now, say, example, you're playing your game, right? And, okay, you know what, I got to go to work. You just stop. Now, you grab your phone or you grab your Surface, you go to work, and that is a completely different device. And you go to work, bang, you start right up where you finished. Where you stopped.
I mean, I understand the goal there, but I'm not sure it was ever actually practical, was it? Like, I don't think you could actually run Tomb Raider 2016 on a mobile device.
Windows 10 could do a lot of tricks and a lot of stuff.
Yeah, but it's not the operating system that's the problem. It's that the phone simply doesn't have the graphical capability to run a modern game like Tomb Raider 2016.
Yeah, but see, here's one thing I will tell you.
You can't just skip over that. That's like an enormous flaw.
Yeah, like
in
why
everything
would you
just said.
even want to, right?
That's also true.
Well, see, here's the thing. Can I make a point? The interesting thing is what made Windows 10 for phone and Windows PC were basically the same thing. What killed Windows Phone? I'll tell you what. It actually died right after the anniversary update because they went in unison. That was July of 17, and it's what they called all about the apps. And here's how that worked. You see, it's funny because they were already talking then. Oh, Google had all these apps and all these things because they're already starting then mirroring the website on a browser with an app. Now, if you look at it now, with very few exceptions, they're identical. You know, so like
the mobile browser, the mobile version of websites is drastically different from the PC version.
No, I'm talking about say for a phone. Like if you got
the mobile
version, that's what she said.
Say Android or like a browser version, they're going to be identical.
What do you mean Android or a browser version? Android's an operating system. Browser is a type of software that runs.
I know, but I'm saying, okay, but say for example, you use YouTube or you use Netflix or a lot of other things.
YouTube is not identical on the mobile website. To the website. It's not.
No, it's not at all.
You don't think so?
No, I know so.
I mean, even like my website, like the website that I built personally, like I specifically made the mobile version different. Like it doesn't matter what you're running it on, it's going to be different if it's the mobile version because that's how I built it and because it's just... It just doesn't make sense for it to even be the same because when you're running my website on a desktop and when you're running it on your phone, like it's just so... the formatting is just so different, you know?
That's why
it wouldn't even make sense.
You can go in and change something to browser mode. That wouldn't happen, that wouldn't exist if they were identical. If you're looking at something on your phone, it's like, oh, this doesn't fit right. You can go into your settings and be like, go to browser mode, see if it fixes it.
Yeah, the most WordPress is running on something like WordPress is running on something like 25% of all websites are powered by WordPress. Maybe it's 20%. It's some large percentage. And WordPress has probably come the closest between making a browser, a desktop site look and function the same way as a mobile site. But even it is drastically different. I mean, these are two very different platforms that behave in very different ways. And the look and feel of them is very different.
That's why I had the experience you're talking about. Because when I ran Windows 10 phone, it was just like running Windows 10 PC, just scaled a little bit here and there. But you know what? One point I wanted to make, and I'm going to actually buy one coming in next month, and here's the reason why. Because
you're going to buy one what?
I'm going to buy a Lumia 950 XL, and I'll tell you why.
What is that?
Because what's that? That was the first phone to run an octa-core back November of 15, and I'll tell you why I'm buying it. Everything will work. There's very few things that are going to make a bit of a difference in actual life. I don't have to worry about playing games. I'm blind. But here's what I do want. Windows 10 phone used a very elaborate system for navigating web pages for blind people. Now, the problem with Android, and I've talked to Samsung at length about this because I got up to date on what the S23 can do. It doesn't have any of that. You know, so basically, all you got is the touchback crap with Samsung. That's useless. And, you know...
Well, this is a browser thing, right? Like, Microsoft Edge is...
This was actually, it didn't use Cortana. It used the internal voice within Windows 10, either Sam or the chick voice. And it was a very elaborate system where you can navigate web pages and you can go right and left. And by doing that, you can say paragraphs, lines, links, whatever, and jump around with that.
I mean, that's awesome. I had heard here and there that Windows tends to be more accessible than other operating systems, but that's never been like one of the primary features for me, so I haven't looked into that very closely.
Why does Android not have this? I'll tell you why. And I talked to Samsung, and I remember Peakless said, I can't use the word he did, but he says, you know what, Google is screwing blind people. Well, here's the reality. It's a limitation of Android. Microsoft wouldn't care. They're old friends, them and Samsung. They took it and put it in there. But the problem is they can't use this system within Android using the internal voice. They can't do it. It's impossible to happen.
Yeah, that sounds awful. Thank you so much for the call tonight, Ricky. And as I said, I've heard that Windows is better for, disabled people and accessibility and all of that, and that's great. And I'm glad there's software out there that's doing that. I don't know. It doesn't necessarily have to detract from the Android experience to be like that, but I do want all of that crap disabled. And I say it's crap because I'm thinking of like voice activation and fingerprint
Siri.
unlocks and Siri. And,
stuff that you wouldn't need.
Right. Things that are always listening, always on. I get that there's a purpose for those for people like Ricky who are blind and who can't access their phone. And I've watched Riley, who does the digest for us here on Free Talk Live. He's blind.
Mm-hmm.
And I've watched him use his phone. And
it's really cool, actually.
Yeah, he sort of taps it on the screen, and I have no idea.
And he does it so fast. He's like tapping so fast, he knows what he's doing.
But
obviously.
I don't know how it works. What he's doing.
I don't even know what he's doing.
Yeah, but
cool.
he's doing something. It's cool.
But
and it talks to him really quickly because he's just that fast on it.
Yeah.
And so he's just like waiting for it to say something, and he taps again. So I don't know.
I'm glad these tools exist. I've never used them, so I can't really have a conversation about them, but I am glad they exist. So thank you so much for the call tonight, Ricky. And if you want to buy your 2015 phone, I think that's what he said he was going to get, then more power to you, man. I don't want an 8-year-old phone in today's world. I don't want an 8-year-old computer in today's world. I don't want an 8-year-old anything if I can help it.
It might be different if you're blind, though, because like the main reason I wouldn't want an 8-year-old phone would be because the camera would suck so bad.
That's
a lot
really
of people
true.
don't care about that.
Like the camera on this phone is so good that it shocked me when I first got it. Like I would take a picture of holy crap, that's a good picture.
When I first switched from Galaxies to iPhone, I was seriously in like a whole new world for like 2 weeks. Just like, I'm going to take a picture again. Oh my God, it looks like me. It doesn't look like this weird phone version of me that I've always been like, why do I look so weird in pictures? No, oh my God, I love iPhone's camera so much more. The Google Pixel is also crazy good. Like it looks like real life to me.
So speaking of real life, people are a little bit confused about what Jesus may or may not have been like in actual real life. And obviously, like this has been known since like Plato. Was it Plato? I don't remember. Some Greek philosopher pointed out that it wasn't a coincidence that the Greeks worshipped white gods and that the Persians worshipped gods that looked Persian and that black people worship gods that look black and Indians worship gods that look like Indians, right? That's not a coincidence. And it's continued on into today where if you ask any white Christian in the United States what Jesus would look like, they'll tell you he was a white man.
Well, I mean, it's the same reason why they're gods. I mean, even the fact that they just resemble a human being, never mind the race.
I'm reading a book about exactly that topic. And, the modern Christian idea is that Yahweh doesn't have a real physical body, right? He's just this sort of disembodied power.
I mean, that would make sense, right?
But it's wrong, right? Like if you go to one of these museums or if you study any other religion in human history, you're going to see statues of God, statues of, Brahma or Vishnu or whatever Native American god you can find or Greek gods. Humans, when they were worshiping Zeus, they made statues to Zeus. But if you look around in Christianity, there's none of these for Yahweh. And that's weird.
Isn't it because he specifically told them not to?
No, as it turns out, I don't remember the exact reason why, because I've like 200 pages past that in the book. But it was basically because they wanted to make their God different. I'm not sure exactly why. I'll have to get back to you next week on that because I don't remember off the top of my head why it is, but it's a very human reason, and it's not backed by anything that's actually in the Bible. In actuality, in the Bible, it describes Yahweh as having a very physical form. It describes his feet and his physical body at length.
Now I think about it, there is where Moses goes up to the top of some mountain, and that's when he brings down the Ten Commandments, and it says he sees God's face.
Yeah. And at one point, I remember one of the passages about not making images of God. It was when Moses came back down from the mountain, I think the second time, and God was with him. But there was a veil of fire separating Yahweh from all of the Israelites, and only Moses could see him, and they wanted to make that. And Moses told them, well, look, since you didn't even see what God looks like, you can't make statues of him. And that was one of the main references they made to that. But it describes him as having feet, and this was the reason why you took your shoes off when you entered like churches and stuff back in the days, because God didn't wear shoes, basically. It's all very weird what these concepts humans had back in the day, and I'm not doing it justice here. The book is called God and Anatomy, if someone wants to read it, because I would highly recommend it if you find these topics fascinating. It's not as fascinating as I thought it would be, but it is still pretty interesting to know how, or to be aware that Christianity, for one reason or another, it went from God having a physical body to being this sort of disembodied head. And that is ultimately what happened. But Jesus, of course, was not a disembodied head, for better or worse. Jesus, whether you believe he was a prophet or just a human, or whether you don't even believe he existed, if you read the biblical passages, it never says whether or not Jesus is white or black, because that was just not what people thought about back then, right? Race wasn't the issue then that it is now. They had different things to deal with, like, am I going to die before I'm 25 kind of stuff to deal with.
And it's just interesting because even if we could prove if, Jesus was white or black or whatever, it wouldn't even matter because all of these people are still going to believe whatever they want to believe. You think all these racist, white people are going to, we proved that Jesus was black, so now we have to stop being racist. Unlikely.
I watched that Carlos Mencia sketch before I was aware that Carlos Mencia isn't actually Hispanic. Or whatever. I don't remember the specifics now, but he's apparently not actually Hispanic. But anyway, he made a joke about Jesus being Hispanic or Mexican. He was like, there's a reason he's called Jesus. And I'm like, dude, that's so dumb. I can't even begin. But it
was a joke, right?
I don't know.
I hope so.
Does he actually believe that Jesus was Mexican? I don't know. Right? I wouldn't put it. White people have convinced themselves that Jesus was just a white European man.
Yeah, with blue eyes specifically.
Yeah. So,
like so many Christians, it's not just like, oh, it was painted in cathedrals hundreds of years ago. No, so many Christians today write about like, I went to heaven, I was taken to heaven in a vision, and I saw Jesus and he has blue eyes. Specifically like today, not like hundreds of years ago.
So what did Jesus look like? We'll probably never know, but this nearly 150-year-old stained glass church window depicts a dark-skinned Jesus Christ interacting with women in New Testament scenes.
Are they dark-skinned?
I
just have some
Yes,
questions.
she is.
Sorry.
She is dark-skinned. And this is another thing, because the way the book that I was talking about, God and Anatomy, begins, it talks about parts of the human body and their significance in religion and Christianity in particular. And that's another one of the reasons that Jesus washing Mary Magdalene's feet was, and the feet of prostitutes in general, was such a big deal.
I thought it was just a fetish thing.
Well, it could have been, right? I wouldn't put it past him.
I won't kink shame Jesus.
No, definitely not. But anyway, that was why it was such a horrible thing, right?
I thought she washed her feet. Oh, no.
He washed her feet.
She, offered to wash his feet, and he said, no, I'll wash your feet. I don't remember.
I don't remember exactly how it happened, but I do remember
it's just so
for
funny
sure that Jesus washed her feet.
I know nothing about the Bible, so this conversation is just so funny to me. I'm like, what are you guys talking about?
Yeah, so there's this passage in the Bible where Jesus is hanging out with some prostitutes, and he's like,
cool.
Hey, babe, I'm going to wash your feet. And she's like, okay. And he washes her feet.
Absolutely a fetish thing, so my initial hunch was correct.
Possibly, I'm not saying it's not, but the significance of feet and being pure when entering a holy place is one of the reasons that this upset people so much. But anyway, this is only 150 years old, so it's not like it's a stained glass window from like a 12th century church, which wouldn't give it any more credibility than it would have if it was made 150 years ago, but to some people it would. Anyway, the window was installed at the long-closed St. Mark's Episcopal Church in Warren, Rhode Island in 1878, and it's the oldest known public example of stained glass on which Christ is depicted as a person of color that one expert has ever seen. So he says, this window is unique and highly unusual. I have never seen this iconography for that time, and I tend to agree, especially in the United States. I would not expect to see a black Jesus on stained glass from something dated to the 19th century. I wouldn't expect to see that in the 20th century.
That's exactly why I was so shocked by it. That's why I was like, wait, did you say New England?
Yeah.
It was really
Rhode
weird.
Island. The 12-foot tall, 5-foot wide window depicts two biblical passages in which women, also painted with dark skin, appears equals to Jesus Christ. One shows Christ in conversation with Martha and Mary, who were the sisters of Lazarus from the Gospel of Luke. Is Luke the weird one that's sort of different from the other three?
Luke is the one that Jesus is more emotional and sweet.
Okay, thanks. Because I've never...
So I think that it
remember
is
off the top of my
different
head.
because of that.
Yeah, one of them is like a weird side story kind of thing. It's not a side story, but one of them is distinctly different
I think
from
it's
the
Luke,
other three.
and
I
it is
think
the one
so.
where he's more like emotional.
The other shows Christ speaking to the Samaritan woman at the well from the Gospel of John, and I assume she's the one who he told to go back to her first husband.
I don't
know which one that's referring to. I'm not as familiar with the Bible as you would expect.
I'm
right?
more familiar with the Old Testament because I was older during quizzing when we were doing Old Testament. I was way younger when we did Matthew and Acts. I barely remember those.
See, I was so young then when my family was like, we're going to do Bible time. And then every single day for like half an hour, we would have to sit around and they would read the Bible and then discuss it. And it was horrible. And they like started at the beginning and just kept going. Like,
oh my gosh.
This devoured my summers. Like while other kids were out there playing t-ball or whatever, we're stuck. And it was only like an hour a day or half an hour each day. But like when you're 7 years old, that's an eternity.
Better stories too.
Right. We always did the same thing, but my mom would like go months forgetting she wanted to do that, and then she'd be like, all right, we're going to institute this Bible study a day thing. But she would always choose like a specific book. I've never in my life read the Bible from the beginning to the end. There's huge swaths of the Old Testament that I've never even looked at.
Well, we didn't
How
make
many
it to the
pages
end.
is the Bible?
A lot.
I don't know.
I mean, it depends
Is it
on
like,
the format and the
yeah.
size of the text and all of that. But I mean, it's a lot.
It's like War and Peace, like 1,400 pages or longer.
I think it's about 400,000 words, if I remember correctly. Not entirely sure.
Jesus wept.
Yeah. So anyway, we started at Genesis 1:1 and we went all the way to, I want to say we got to like Psalms or something before we skipped to the New Testament. And we didn't get far into the New Testament before life sort of took us all our different directions. And I ended up moving in with my father. So this went on for like 7 years of being exposed to the Bible every single day like this. Very tedious, very exhausting. But I don't remember individual passages and stuff. I remember the gist and some of the things I remember better than the other. But like the story of Jesus and the woman at the well in John, I have no idea which story that's referring to. I would speculate it's the woman to whom he said, your current husband, you mean your first husband, return to him or whatever.
I don't even remember that. I want to say it's the woman that touched his robe and had great faith.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people like passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com.
Should you be able to earn an honest living free from senseless government interference? The Institute for Justice thinks so. That's why we've spent years defending hard-working men and women from pointless government regulations. Nationwide, IJ has created opportunity by reducing government power. But there is still more work to be done. Visit our website today at ij.org. Let IJ take care of the government so you can take care of your business.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next, after the news, here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. World leaders are arriving in Japan for the G7 summit being held in Hiroshima this week. The three-day talks are expected to address global security and financial challenges, including enhancing sanctions on Russia and reducing economic reliance on China. FSN's Chris Gilbert reports from Tokyo.
For Japan's Prime Minister and this year's G7 host, Fumio Kishida, months of planning and organization are about to be put into practice. The summit's being held in his hometown of Hiroshima, which was hit by an American nuclear bomb in 1945. Kishida reportedly chose the venue to promote peace and nuclear disarmament. He's made several personal trips to visit his G7 peers in Europe and North America this year to lay the groundwork for the meeting. The agenda is expected to focus on reducing G7 countries' reliance on Chinese exports, increasing financial pressure on Russia to hamper its ability to continue fighting in Ukraine, and reaching out to global South countries to diversify supply lines. It'll wrap up with a joint statement on Sunday.
U.S. President Joe Biden says a deal on raising the debt ceiling won't happen until he returns from that G7 summit. Biden spoke to reporters before he left Washington on Wednesday morning. He said he plans to hold a press conference on his return on Sunday. He has canceled his Australia leg of his trip to continue negotiations on trying to raise the U.S.'s borrowing limit to prevent an unprecedented default.
I'll be in constant contact with my team while I'm at the G7, and I'll be in close touch with Speaker McCarthy and other leaders as well. Now, what I have done, in anticipation that we won't get it all done till I get back, is I've cut my trip short in order to be for the final negotiations and sign the deal with the majority leader. And we're going to continue these discussions with congressional leaders in the coming days until we reach an agreement, and I'll have more to say about that on Sunday.
U.S. stocks surged on Wednesday, fueled by hopes that U.S. lawmakers will reach a deal to raise the debt ceiling. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says the government may be unable to pay its bills as early as June 1st. FSN's William Denzelo reports from New York.
In remarks at the White House, US President Joe Biden said he was confident a deal will be reached on the budget and that the country won't default on its debt. And speaking to CNBC, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy also expressed optimism a deal could be reached. That gave Wall Street a boost during trading hours, with the Dow and S&P both ending the day up 1.2% and the Nasdaq up 1.3%. There was also robust economic data out, showing that new home construction ticked up 2.2% in April. In company news, Target rose over 2.5% on stronger than expected earnings.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, the author Salman Rushdie, in his own words. The novelist who survived an assassination attempt in New York last August made a video appearance this week at the British Book Awards, where he was honoured with the Freedom to Publish Award. We have not seen very much of the author of the Satanic Verses since he narrowly survived a stabbing by an Islamic extremist during an appearance last August in New York State. While he's lost the sight in one eye, he was unsparing in his defense of his craft.
It's quite remarkably alarming to see publishers looking to, how shall I put this, bowdlerize the work of such people as Roald Dahl and Ian Fleming. I have to say, the idea that James Bond could be made politically correct is almost comical. I think that has to be resisted. Books have to come to us from their time and be of their time. And if that's difficult to take, don't read it. Read another book. But don't try and remake yesterday's work in the light of today's attitudes.
Salman Rushdie struggles to write these days, but told The New Yorker recently that he still has gratitude that most of his more severe injuries have responded to treatment. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
The main news again. World leaders begin arriving in Japan for the G7 summit expected to address global security and financial challenges. Joe Biden says a deal on raising the U.S.'s debt ceiling won't happen until he returns from his trip to Japan. And U.S. stocks surge on hopes that lawmakers are close to reaching a deal to raise the debt ceiling and avoid an unprecedented default. That is the latest Feature Story News. Ira Spitzer reporting.
A total loser's corpse contained no traces of drugs or alcohol, and a superstitious Delta Airlines adds busty mermaids to its plane noses. My friend, you look like you are in need of the world's finest internet news summaries. Please come in and warm yourself by the fire of knowledge. This is the Onion Week in Review. A new law passed in Colorado this week will allow residents with a doctor's prescription to purchase medicinal fireworks, saying that those in need of stargazers, firecrackers, and Galleria highlights now need only obtain a doctor's prescription. State officials expressed hope that the law would ease the suffering of those in need of huge, dazzling explosions. And in this week's op-ed pages, a man notes that, like it or not, we all die, then get dug up and molested. In other news, white male privilege is squandered on a job at Best Buy, and a local TCBY has missed the past 2 logo changes. Well, that's it for now. Goodbyes are bittersweet, my love, so I'll only tell you, for more, keep checking theonion.com.
This is the Onion News Network.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live, and you can join us. You can talk about whatever's important to you, or you can talk about what we're discussing here, which is Black Jesus. And I mean, really, I don't know what ethnicity Jesus was, right? And I don't think it really matters. I'm not even convinced that Jesus was a person who actually existed. I don't know. However, some people think he's white, some people think he's black, some people think he's Middle Eastern. I mean, he was Jewish at the very least, and when I think of a Jewish person, I don't think of a white person, typically. Or someone who's ethnically Jewish, I don't think of a white person. 603-283-6160, though, you can let us know what you think about when you think of Jesus.
Back then, that's like before the diaspora, right? There just wouldn't have been white Jews.
Yeah, I tend to think not. But my impression of Paul, for one reason or another, though, is very much of a white person.
Well, wasn't he from Greece?
Was he? Maybe that's why. I don't know off the top of my head.
I know he was like working for the government.
I don't have much respect for Paul. I feel like he was a heretic who wanted power over others, and he saw that opportunity in Christianity, and he took it, and he turned Christianity into a justification of getting power over others.
Mark wants me to read a book about just that, about how Paul was just a grifter, but I haven't started it yet, and I'm really interested.
603-283-6160. But this hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash, which is digital cash. It's a cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. And it's been more than 2 years now since I used any cryptocurrency. But the last time I used Dash, you could send it for a fee of 0.001 Dash, which is pennies or fractions of a penny, versus the last I heard about Bitcoin, fees were running $5 per transaction, and just complete nonsense, completely unusable. Dash doesn't have that problem. And last year, Dash launched a killer app that allows you to spend Dash at more than 155,000 locations across the U.S. You won't find something like that for Bitcoin or even Bitcoin Cash, which is arguably another of my favorite cryptocurrencies. 155,000 locations across the United States where you can spend Dash, which gives you finally a reason to spend your crypto. And it's not just being able to spend Dash, you actually get a discount for using Dash. 2%, 3%, all the way up to 8 or 9%. The stores on Dash Direct each offer their own discount level, but some are as high as 8 or 9% off, and Dash is the only cryptocurrency with incentives to spend rather than hold, thanks to Dash Direct. And the decentralized autonomous organization, the Dash DAO, they've always done stuff like this to encourage people to actually spend and use Dash. A number of years ago, they had the Dash Back program, which would give you 5% back of your Dash that was spent or something along those lines. It was really cool.
Well, they still have something like that with the Dash Direct app,
Do they?
You can get Dash back for using it at different stores, but each store is like different. Like it could be 1% here and 5% at a different store.
Okay. Very cool. I haven't used it. And I want to say thank you, though, to the Dash DAO for sending us $32. Starting over. I want to say thank you to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit dash.org to learn about Dash. That's dash.org. And thank you to the people at Dash for that. So moving back into the phones, we do have Major Payne on the line from Michigan. Major, you're on Free Talk Live.
Yeah. You gals do know what year it is, right?
No.
2023.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
Right?
Thanks. I forgot my calendar at home.
Well, no, the whole reason I just brought that up is because that was the year Jesus died. There is no other person in history that you can think of where there was a restart on history. Right?
I'm confused. What are you talking about?
Are you saying because people started doing AD and BC before Christ, or BC and AC, or whatever it is?
Well, it depends. I mean, even a lot of religious people I know don't use BC and AD. I mean, that's sort of deprecated terminology. I don't know any scientists who use BC and AD. There's BCE.
It's like ACE, yeah.
There's BCE and CE, which is also what I use, which is the Common Era.
We work off of starts on AD.
No, the calendar we used to work off. No, the calendar we used to work off of erroneously started with AD.
But doesn't it still start the same year, the year that Jesus was born?
Well,
they just call it something else.
Allegedly,
Christians allege that it was the year that Jesus was born, right? But we don't actually know. They just counted backward based off, biblical text. I was like, all right, that's what we're calling year one.
Yeah, so there's some debatable factor about what exact year it was, or whether it was September or December or whatnot.
Or whether he existed.
I didn't even call in about that. If they restarted history, he was obviously infamous.
Well, I'm pretty sure that the man named Jesus existed. And the reason why is because my favorite biblical scholar believes that, and he is literally a biblical scholar. Like, he's been the first to lay his eyes on certain scrolls that have been found, things like that. He's not just like, somebody pontificating. And he believes that Jesus, the man named Jesus, existed. The thing that's up for debate is, was he like the Son of God? Did he perform these miracles?
I think he probably existed as well, but it's certainly not proven by any means. I tend to think you're absolutely right. And I haven't heard a scholar say that, but I can imagine so, because there is overwhelming evidence. I mean, Jesus as a figure was very impactful in society. It stands to reason that there probably was at some point a person upon whom all of these stories were based. But it wasn't when Jesus was born, people didn't go, oh my God, it's 1 CE, it's 1 AD now. No, it was like the 3rd or 4th century of CE when they started. It wasn't even then, was it? When did
I have
we
no clue.
It would have been during Pope Gregory. That would have been like the 15th century or so, where he backdated it to be 1 AD.
I have literally no clue. I've never looked into this.
I didn't know it was that late.
Well, it would have to have been, I'm speculating, not 100% sure, but it would have been when the Gregorian calendar came into existence, which is when we had these months before that. Before that, we had the Julian calendar, and the Gregorian calendar was largely based on that, but that only deals with like months and years. I don't know exactly when we began counting years in BCE and CE, or BC and AD for the Christians out there, but it certainly was not early on in last millennium.
I think we should restart starting in 2009 as year one, and everything after that is ABC after Bitcoin. I didn't make that up, but I love it.
Anything else on your mind tonight, Major?
Well, yeah, you guys were discussing whether or not Jesus is black. Well, there is, and of course, none of us were there when the Bible was written, and none of us have seen the visions or had the experiences that are on the paper. But it is purported that during the 3 days between Jesus' crucifixion and his ascension to heaven, that he visited all the peoples in the world. And that is why everybody has a Jesus that looks like them. there's people on the shore of Africa that are purported to be of Jewish heritage, and they are, way dark.
So I looked into this real quick, and I found an answer. We do, in fact, use the Gregorian calendar, but we're not. That's not the only calendar, right? Like the Mayan calendar isn't fractured into BC and AD, and that was something I didn't think of. That it's just because we don't use the Maya calendar, but we could very much, if we wanted to, date everything in BC in Maya instead of BC and AD. However, that aside, we first began using this thing by a monk in the 6th century. The year 525 came up with the system of BC and AD. And then he backdated everything so that year 1 was when he speculated that Jesus would have lived based on, whatever historical records he had at the time. He just sort of backtracking. Okay, well, this person was 32 when they had this person and blah, 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 all the way back to, in theory, year 1. But that only came into existence in the year 525, which is earlier than I would have expected, to be fair.
Well, if this man hadn't been so famous, would somebody 600 years later even bother to find out when they think he was born just by ancient writings?
I think we all agree he was famous.
What Bonnie was talking about earlier with her genius, she's talking about was probably the Dead Sea Scrolls he was reading.
I mean, Genghis Khan was also famous. I mean, there have been plenty of famous historical figures. The fact that this Gregorian monk just in the year 525, calculated things back to 8 BC and AD, and this persisted on into the modern times until we more recently switched to BCE and CE. That simply speaks to the pervasiveness of Christianity. Doesn't suggest at all that there was any truth to it whatsoever. It just suggests that Christianity was very powerful and influential.
Well, what it says to me is that there was a true story and people believed it, and it spread like wildfire.
Well,
just because people believe it doesn't mean it's true.
No. Don't you guys talk over me all the damn time.
It's like the first thing I've said your entire phone call.
Okay, good night.
Yep. I'm glad I got that out of it. I got him.
Why did he get so mad?
He does that every Wednesday.
Every Wednesday, yeah. He gets really upset. It's because I one time said, he was like, well, I'm right. Christianity is true. And I was like, well, I don't really care if everyone on earth believes in a thing. If I find out that it's not true and I align myself with truth, I would be happy to be right, whether everyone else on... He made some point that lots of people are Christians. It's the most popular... It was like, okay, that doesn't have anything to do with whether or not it's true.
Yeah, and that's the point I was trying to make. And I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being a Christian. There's nothing wrong with believing in and worshiping Jesus.
No,
I just don't.
I don't think
and don't tell me I'm going to hell because I don't believe in your weird cult.
Right, and appeals to argumentum ad populum, which is that, well, a lot of people believe it, therefore it must be true, which is effectively what you're arguing when you're saying, well, Christianity had a huge impact on the world, therefore it must be right. Yeah. Well, I don't know.
I mean, so did slavery.
That's true.
You know what I mean? So did a ton of awful things, and I'm sure there was a lot of falsehoods. The Greeks thought that... Helios drove a chariot across the sky and that was the sun. I mean, there's historically been tons of things that were widely believed just to, in an attempt to explain the world around us. Doesn't make it true.
It certainly doesn't. And, I'm happy that we now know, when BC and AD first came into usage, and that was in 525 AD. Of course, we did switch... Society as a whole switched from BC and AD to BCE and CE, and I like that a lot better. But it's still year 1 is the same in AD and CE, so it's like a 1-to-1 correspondence, right?
But the thing about what Major Payne was saying, that lots of people were Christians at the time, so it must be true, that's so crazy is that all those people at that time believed wildly different things. There were more sects of Christianity back then than there are now that believed completely different things. Like some believed that Jesus, when he died, his whole entire body, not just his soul, just went into the ether or whatever. disappeared with him. And then they would fight with the ones who didn't believe that and believe that his body stayed here. They all had so many different ideas of what Christianity was. It's like they had some of them would, like the clerics or whatever that would write, whoever would write down the Bible books, and
the scribes.
Yeah,
right?
the scribes. They would purposely be like, okay, I don't like this because this doesn't align with what me and my people believe. So I'm going to write it like this and just add a word or two to make it fit whatever their sect believed. And then someone else would get that copy and be like, I don't like this. It doesn't jive with what I believe about like the nature of the Spirit of God or whatever. So I'm going to change this word. Like it's not like they all believe the same exact thing.
Right. I mean, you take any two Christians today and they probably won't believe the exact same things either. But I find it amusing that he mentions the Dead Sea Scrolls because those are fascinating from a Christian perspective because, like, they say things that are not in the Bible. Like
that
there's
would be
the whole Gnostic Gospels.
Yep, they would be completely... Like, my mom believes that Gnosticism is, like, the worst thing. Like, that's something Satan put out just to confuse people. So, like...
I mean, it resonates more with me. Gnosticism, what I know about Gnosticism, it resonates more with me than mainstream Christianity. But I'm a Satanist, so I've recently bought what they call the lost books of the Bible, and that's the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? And the Gnostic Gospels and all of that, like the Book of Thomas, the Book of Mary, these sorts of things. And my father had a copy of them. This is when I first became aware of them a long time ago. My father had a copy of them, and I was, just some dumb kid. So
that's what it is.
That's what it's called. Mm-hmm. So I never actually read them, but it always stuck in my mind that there was this Gospel of Mary somewhere. And it wasn't until like a few years ago, it was way more than a few years ago, probably 15 years ago at this point, that I became aware of what they called the lost books of the Bible. But I've never actually read them. And out of all of them, the book of Enoch is the one that I think is going to be the most fascinating. Because aren't there like 365 books of Enoch or something?
I don't know, but me and my dad read the book of Enoch together one time, and we were like, this is so interesting. And yet my mom would be absolutely horrified if she read, I don't know if she has, but if she read the Gospel of Thomas. It's like,
that's
lots
the first
of
one
stuff that's
of
really
the
bad. If you're,
lost books, right?
If you're like a Southern Christian right now and you read the Gospel of Thomas, you're gonna be like, this is bad, this is not right. I
don't want to read the
Jesus
lost books of the Bible.
someone.
I find it fascinating, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Thomas, all of those. I find it fascinating, but I don't want to waste the time reading them.
Yeah, honestly.
I want to read a book by a scholar who has read them and analyzed them and tells me what's in them, tells me the interesting stuff in them. That's what I want. I don't want to go out there and find it myself. I want the people who have made their life's work to analyze and study these things. And I know these books exist, right?
You need to read, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's Bart Ehrman's book about Judas. Oh my God, that one was so freaking interesting, cool. It's Judas.
Can you send it to me on Matrix?
Sure.
Because that's exactly what I was getting at. Like, if anyone out there knows, I mean, you know what I'm looking for now.
I don't know if it's called the Gospel of Judas, but that's what I was talking about. Like, he was one of the first people National Geographic allowed.
Judas, like 25 pieces of silver Judas?
Yeah.
Okay.
That Judas. Yep. It's supposed to be like his story. It makes him seem more like a good guy, and it's really cool. It's basically like Jesus pulled him aside and was like, you're going to betray me, but you're the only one that understands that I need to do this. So you have to.
I mean, it had to happen, right? If the Christian belief is true, and look, if you read the Old Testament, nothing that Jesus was prophesied to have done did he actually do. Like, he was supposed to be the king, not come here and get nailed to a piece of wood. So he kind of like didn't do what he was supposed to do. But if you're a modern Christian, you believe that he fulfilled the prophecy or whatever, then he did in fact need Judas to betray him. Otherwise, none of it would have ever happened. But that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for some scholarly analysis of these things so that I can read it and I can skip over the boring parts and Isaac begat Ishbab and Ishbab begat. I want to skip all of that. I don't want to read it. I have better things to do in my time than to read the lost books of the Bible, which is a religion I don't even believe in. So what do I care about the lost books? But I do care about the impact. And I want like a Cliff Notes version by a scholar who has made it their life's mission to read these. That's why I like Dan McKellen so much.
He reads Coptic. He reads and knows Hebrew and Greek and all this stuff. And
Your dad does?
No. Did I say or did it sound like that? No, I'm talking about the guy, Bart Ehrman, that wrote the book I was telling you about. And he won't just type out the book to you. He'll tell you certain parts, and then he'll explain to you, this is what that meant at the time. This is what this word means. So if you were just reading it yourself, you'd be like, what? But when he explains it to you.
That's exactly what I want, because I don't have the context that makes some of these things so important. Like the story of Mary Magdalene and Jesus washing her feet. Like, I'm like, all right, well, that's kind of weird, right? But when you have the context of like how important it was to have clean feet when going into a place of worship and all that, when you have that context, it makes the story so much more meaningful. If I read the lost books of the Bible, I won't have that context.
Well, and I always think about that when people quote Bible verses and then they're like, and this is what this means, and it's just something completely different, because it seems like people will just draw whatever they want to believe. Like even, all the stuff about, homosexuality is a sin and all stuff like that. People are just bringing their own meaning to it. They're not necessarily like word for word. That's not what it says.
Well, I wish, on the subject of homosexuality, I wish that Christians was like, just pick a lane and stay in it. Right? They either discard the Old Testament and say it's irrelevant and go on with what Jesus said, or they stick to the Old Testament, in which case they can't eat pork, they have to hang witches, or they have to
most people are hypocrites, right? So they're gonna
but
pick
they love
and choose
pointing to the Bible
yeah.
as reasons that we have to be against homosexuality and transsexualism, even though, as I learned from Dan McClellan, the Torah, was it the Torah or the Talmud or whatever, one of these Jewish books, and that's why I like him, because he does read ancient Assyrian and all of these other languages that I wouldn't be able to read, but he makes TikToks and they're really informative. As he pointed out, there's 6 different genders mentioned in the Talmud, right? Yeah,
I did not know that.
I don't remember all of them now, but there's way more than just man and woman mentioned in this ancient holy book. And that's not something that Christians talk about today.
Oh, of course not.
Of course, the Talmud isn't a religious book to Christians. But the fact that even exists, like, how come I've never heard about this?
I know, that's actually really fascinating.
Why is it that the Talmud's not religious to Christians when they, carry around the Torah and their Bible all the time?
Also a really good point. And I could be wrong about it being in the Talmud. I don't know, right? Like, I watched a TikTok about it. That's basically what I have to go with at this point, is my memory of what he said in this TikTok. But he makes fantastic TikToks, and he's extremely knowledgeable, and I trust his judgment. He does a podcast though, and I don't want to listen to a podcast. I do, and I listen to his podcast. It's called Data Over Dogma, which is one of the things I really like about Mormons. I wouldn't like a Christian when they say data over dogma. I know they mean like Christian Science, and they mean the earth is really 6,000 years old, and that's what the data says. But when a Mormon like Dan McClellan says that, I'm like, all right. So they're going to actually stay true to the principles of science here, and that means a lot to me. So I trust his analysis of things, but he doesn't write books. And it's fine to listen to a podcast, but I learn more and I absorb information better when I read it. So if you have a book out there and you can recommend it, 603-283-6160, or just hold on and you can wait until I go to prison and you can get it sent to me from Amazon, which I've had a lot of people ask me in the last few days, because, it's been 3 weeks since I was sent this.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So
oh gosh.
So I've had a lot of people asking me, have you, what prison are you going to? Are you going to a men's prison or a women's prison? And I literally don't know anything today that I did not know at the sentencing. They're probably not going to tell me anything until a day or two before.
You think?
Yeah. I mean, they're the government. They're not in a hurry. What do they care? Right? They don't. Yeah, I would be shocked.
I'm actually shocked, though.
I think I will learn at PorkFest where I will be going, and I'm almost certain it's going to be a men's prison, not a women's prison, because that's what they do, right? They work in the Bureau of Prisons. It's their job to maximize suffering, and the way they can maximize my suffering would be by putting me into a men's prison. So that's fully what I expect from them, because that's what they do. They get off on it, right?
Doesn't that mean you'll just be? Well, maybe you don't know, but.
Does this ever happen to you? Moments after you're introduced to someone, you forget his or her name. It's a common faux pas you'll want to avoid, especially if you're a job seeker. And even if you're not, here's a tip. As you are being introduced, and while you're still shaking hands, smiling, and making eye contact, say the person's name aloud. Not only does that make a deposit in your memory bank, it acknowledges the other person. And that is more than a nuance, as is maintaining eye contact. With money and attention so scarce now, effective communication skills have never been more important. Cutting through the clutter rather than blending into the blah, blah, blah will help you connect better, no matter what the conversation. For more tips, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. World leaders are arriving in Japan for the G7 summit being held in Hiroshima this week. The three-day talks are expected to address global security and financial challenges, including enhancing sanctions on Russia and reducing economic reliance on China. FSN's Chris Gilbert reports from Tokyo.
For Japan's Prime Minister and this year's G7 host, Fumio Kishida, months of planning and organization are about to be put into practice. The summit's being held in his hometown of Hiroshima, which was hit by an American nuclear bomb in 1945. Kishida reportedly chose the venue to promote peace and nuclear disarmament. He's made several personal trips to visit his G7 peers in Europe and North America this year to lay the groundwork for the meeting. The agenda is expected to focus on reducing G7 countries' reliance on Chinese exports, increasing financial pressure on Russia to hamper its ability to continue fighting in Ukraine, and reaching out to global South countries to diversify supply lines. It'll wrap up with a joint statement on Sunday.
U.S. President Joe Biden says a deal on raising the debt ceiling won't happen until he returns from that G7 summit. Biden spoke to reporters before he left Washington on Wednesday morning. He said he plans to hold a press conference on his return on Sunday. He has canceled his Australia leg of his trip to continue negotiations on trying to raise the U.S.'s borrowing limit to prevent an unprecedented default.
I'll be in constant contact with my team while I'm at the G7, and I'll be in close touch with Speaker McCarthy and other leaders as well. Now, what I have done, in anticipation that we won't get it all done till I get back, is I've cut my trip short in order to be for the final negotiations and sign the deal with the majority leader. And we're going to continue these discussions with congressional leaders in the coming days until we reach an agreement, and I'll have more to say about that on Sunday.
U.S. stocks surged on Wednesday, fueled by hopes that U.S. lawmakers will reach a deal to raise the debt ceiling. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says the government may be unable to pay its bills as early as June 1st. FSN's William Denzelo reports from New York.
In remarks at the White House, US President Joe Biden said he was confident a deal will be reached on the budget and that the country won't default on its debt. And speaking to CNBC, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy also expressed optimism a deal could be reached. That gave Wall Street a boost during trading hours, with the Dow and S&P both ending the day up 1.2% and the Nasdaq up 1.3%. There was also robust economic data out, showing that new home construction ticked up 2.2% in April. In company news, Target rose over 2.5% on stronger than expected earnings.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is...
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, and you can join us 603-283-6160 if you want to do that. That's 603-283-6160. With you tonight, it's Aria,
Nikki, and it's Bonnie.
And coming up in October, if you would like to hang out with Mark Edge and learn about projects that are happening around the world to help achieve liberty in our lifetimes, you might want to check out Liberty in Our Lifetime. It's October the 14th and the 15th at Prague. That's in Europe, obviously. Representatives from projects in the United States, Honduras, Germany, and Norway will join to share updates on progress and explain why you should consider moving or doing business in a free city. Mark spoke at last year's conference, and he called the gathering of people most likely to create more human freedom. So visit libertyinourlifetime.org to find out more. You can use code FTL for a 10% discount on tickets. That's libertyinourlifetime.org. October the 14th through the 15th. That is at Prague. Lifetime, libertyinourlifetime.org. So we're talking here about Black Jesus. I've got a related story about an ancient...
That's a Lady Gaga song.
What, Black Jesus?
Mm-hmm.
Is it?
Black Jesus, Jesus is the new black.
Oh. Never heard that. All right. But we're not talking about the song. We're talking about the possibility of Jesus being black. And I've got a related story.
If this story opens up that possibility. It's like
well, yeah, it doesn't.
Newest painting of Jesus as black. They could have just not had a beige color.
I mean, it is interesting, though, because when you think in America in this time, people were very racist, even up north where maybe slavery wasn't as common because we didn't have we didn't have plantations and stuff like that. And people were still racist.
Yeah.
So even
absolutely.
just the fact that this was in a church.
Well, I've got a related story about an ancient tablet found on Mount Ebal. It predates known Hebrew inscriptions. If it turns out to be real, and I don't know yet whether or not it's actually real, but it contains the text, "You are cursed by God." And I want to get into that. But first, we do take calls, 603-283-6160 if you want to join us. Again, 603-283-6160. We have Creighton on the line from Kentucky. Creighton, you're on Free Talk Live.
Hi. Sometimes I'm truly amazed at how the topics you range on, but I called in because I am personally Gnostic.
Okay.
And specifically, I am an old Earth evolutionary creationist.
Old Earth evolutionary creationist.
What does that mean?
Old Earth means that the Earth is significantly older than 6,000 years old.
Right, 4.6 billion
means that as the concept that God created the rules of evolution and therefore created nature by evolution. So they're not contradictory.
Okay, yeah, see, like, that would make sense to me. To me, that makes sense more than just, completely disregarding evolution.
That completely resonates with me, too. It's just like, it makes more sense than just thinking God just, bam, here's donkeys, bam, here's humans. There would be some kind of evidence for that, and there's not.
Well, there's evidence of the opposite, right? We have transitional fossils and stuff like that. Like, every fossil is a transitional fossil.
And part of the evidence that I have for that is actually in Genesis itself, the creation story. The order is correct, evolutionary or otherwise.
What do you mean the order is correct?
The order of the days of God, the order that things are created in the story. And
birds, fish, and then mammals are last.
And humans are last of all.
Yeah.
The idea that a day for God can be an entire epoch is actually not a new idea.
Yeah.
Very old.
I could see that. It could be an allegory that's really just about evolution. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, the neocortex is what makes humans human, and it's the newest addition to our brains.
Why does it matter how God would measure time, though? I mean, obviously, a being that is eternal. I mean, if a being is eternal, then he doesn't have any perception of time, right? But let's get eternity out of the equation. Let's get omnipotence and all that, because we can't discuss those because they're ultimately meaningless.
I think he's just saying that it makes it an issue if people really believe like God created the fish of the waters, and then the next day, as we think of a day, he created the birds of the air. The next day, that creates issue because that did not happen. But it could be an allegory. It could just mean like at first at this section he created blah blah blah, then blah blah blah. And I don't know that this is true, but maybe he's right that like fish come first in the Bible, and they actually evolutionarily existed before the other ones, and the other ones, blah, blah, blah.
Well, it's a creation myth. To me, that's just it. The Greeks had a creation myth. The Hindu have one. The Christians have one.
Imagine in our modern knowledge and modern understanding, if we went back in time and we found a goat herder in North Africa and then used his language to try to explain evolution to him, how would you do that?
I couldn't speak his language.
I wouldn't waste my time doing that. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there's a way that we could convey the concept of evolution.
I see what he's saying. Is he trying to say that, like,
there's
people...
simple stuff that God could have said to people that the creator of the universe should have said to people, and that didn't. Like, hey, wash your hands. Maybe. I mean, people. The goat herder could have understood that, but God didn't say that.
Yeah, but humans wrote it, so maybe he's trying to say, like, the smarter humans wrote this in a way that the average goat herder could understand. And I'm not saying that I agree with this, but I just think that that's what he's saying.
But the reason I called it is you mentioned the Apocrypha. And one of the historical quirks about the canon, the official Bible within Christianity, is that during the Apocrypha was originally part of the canon, and it was removed for a historical quirk that was more economic than anything. When King James commissioned the translation and production of Bibles that bear his name today, he was actually commissioning missionary Bibles. And because the Bibles had to be hand copied by professional monks, they were very expensive. So the King James Version Bible that we got at the time and that we still have is actually redacted because it was too expensive and considered generally unnecessary.
Well, there were a bunch of reasons that it was redacted.
Yeah, wasn't there like the Council of Nicaea?
Yeah, and the Council of Trent that determined whether or not Jesus was to be considered divine. I mean,
yeah, there was like specific reasons of what those groups believed that they wanted to knock out certain books, so they did.
Yeah, rumor has it that the Catholic Church has massive amounts of text.
Those events do predate the one you were just talking about, but all three could be true.
I'm just not sure why it matters that, some of these things we know. I mean, we know that some things were intentionally cut out of the Bible because they didn't fit the narrative or they weren't convenient or because the monk didn't like what was said. Bonnie mentioned this earlier on in the show. They was like, I don't particularly think Jesus would have said that, so the monk makes a slight little change to it. We know these things happened.
But the Apocrypha, I have personally read the Apocrypha. And one of the sets of books that I find the most entertaining that are not very long at all. It's called Bel and the Dragon. It is an extension of the book of Daniel.
Bel? Like, how do you spell that?
B-E-L.
Okay.
Bel and the Dragon. They are actually 2 additional chapters of Daniel. And the main character is, of course, Daniel. And in these books, Daniel is functioning as a detective. For lack of a better term, his job for the king was to investigate these.
I mean, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm sure there's all sorts of interesting things that were cut out of these books, and someone has decided that those things are not the Word of God. So, I mean, it's cool that you find value in these books that someone else says are not the Word of God, but like that's your personal belief in regard to these books, and there's all sorts of stuff that was cut out. There's all sorts of stuff that contradicts that was cut out. And then there's entirely different religious texts. I don't see what the significance is of you finding something there interesting, right?
Well, what I find interesting about the story is that he bases his conclusions on science.
Wait, so is there really a dragon in the story?
Yes, a Komodo dragon.
Oh. Well, that's not as cool as a dragon.
Yeah, I just don't.
I hate Komodo dragons.
I don't get the point.
Yeah, thank you so much for the call tonight, Craig.
I wish it was about a real dragon because that was actually really interesting to me. I was like taking mental note, but I'll still look it up. But if it's a Komodo dragon, that's just not as cool. And aren't those only in Indonesia?
Yeah, and New Zealand, right?
Yeah, it doesn't really make sense.
I don't know how they would have. I don't know, man. I haven't read them. The Apocrypha, that is the quote lost. That's the Dead Sea Scrolls. Is that right?
Those are part of it. I think there's more than just them.
So this new ancient tablet was found, and I only find it interesting because it says that people are cursed or whatever. An early Hebrew inscription from Mount Ebal near Nablus, none of that means anything to me, was found on a folded lead tablet during an excavation in the 1980s. It recently underwent X-ray tomographic measurements, which revealed hidden text. So they just found this tablet back in the 1980s, and more recently they put some sort of X-ray on it, and they're like, oh, there's hidden text here. Whatever this means, epigraphic analysis of the data revealed a formulaic curse written in a proto-alphabetic script likely dating to late Bronze Age that predates any previously known Hebrew inscription in Israel by at least 200 years. And it doesn't, how terrible is it? It doesn't tell us what year then this thing would have been dated to. 3,000 year old is what they tell us. So this tablet is about 3,000 years old.
And where was this found again?
Some mountain in somewhere in the Middle East. Mount Ebal near Nablus. Like I said,
that means nothing to me. Yeah.
The finding has just been published in the Journal of blah 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 blah, and then they name a bunch of people and a bunch of universities, none of which we care about. The inscription, though, reads, "You are cursed by the god YHW," because there's some dispute here about whether or not it was Yahweh or whatever.
Yeah, that's like the original way that they would spell what they call Yahweh now.
Right.
It's like the word that can't be spoken.
All of the people that I know that are like super into, I don't know what sect of Christianity it is that are like so into Yahweh, but they always spelled it that way.
YHW?
Yeah.
Not with the H at the end?
Oh, maybe with an H at the end.
See, that was what I was getting at, because
I just remembered there were no vowels.
We know it as YHWH, but this one drops that. And there's some dispute about whether or not the second H is even supposed to be there. It's unclear, apparently. I don't know.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
But this one is just YHW, which it's a very weird looking thing. And I would never have. Why did they keep this? Right? When I'm looking at pictures of it, like, it's a rock, man. It's completely nondescript and dull, and it's just a rock. But they were like, this is not just a rock, and they kept it, and eventually they x-rayed it, and they discovered this text that says, again, "You are cursed by the god Yahweh," which is interesting that they
And that's it? That's all it says?
Yeah.
So what is it? This is like a I don't know, like a mean letter somebody's writing to somebody?
I guess so. In December of 2019, an expedition on Mount Ebal to wet sift the discarded material from excavations led by some dude, blah, 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 yielded a small folded lead tablet. The east dump pile from which the object emerged contained...
How is it folded and lead?
I don't know. I don't
like
know what any of these things mean.
It's crazy.
I mean, if it's a rock. So when they say it's lead, I don't know what they mean, right? I honestly don't know. And it shows pictures, but I'm not a geologist or one of these people who can...
And obviously there was something about this rock that they could tell was like different from the rocks around it, or like cut into a certain way that they would
different.
know.
It looks like a piece of paper from my angle over here.
How'd it get folded if it's a rock? It's so weird.
Don't know. But the tablet could not be opened without damaging it, so it was actually folded. It was a stone tablet that they had folded over, I guess. And they could not open it without damaging it. That's interesting.
Huh.
But now the Israeli-European team of scientists performed X-ray tomographic measurements.
Do you think because they opened it, it cursed them?
Oh,
so
I didn't
it
think
was
about
saying
that.
to whoever opened... Yeah, I didn't think about it either. I thought what Nikki was saying, like that someone sent someone else a letter and said, "You're cursed by Yahweh." But now I think whoever opened it got cursed.
Well, they did not open it.
Oh, yeah, that's a good
They
point.
used X-ray to read it.
That's a cheat.
Haha, science.
Yes. Haha, God.
But I don't know. What in the language of curses, does that count as open? I mean, you read the text, right? You exposed it.
It depends. I mean, how specific Yahweh wants to get, or whoever is placing the curse and in behalf of Yahweh.
Well, they did not open it, but they did read it with X-rays, and it was hidden text in this folded lead tablet. The biblical tradition, Joshua 8:30, notes that Joshua, where the hell does it? Okay, there's a reason it gets into this. Notes that Joshua, the leader of the Israelites who was appointed to take over from Moses, built an altar on Mount Ebal as part of a ceremony to renew the covenant soon after they returned from Egypt to Canaan. So evidently this mountain has biblical significance. This is where one of the leaders of the Israelites built an altar. Thus, the research team said it is possible that Zertal's findings relate to this verse, that the folded up tablet has something to do with Daniel's tablet. Like, presumably, they built this altar, and I like Bonnie's idea here that this was a curse, right? He built this altar, and then, like, at the bottom of it, he put this thing, like, someone's going to break this one day, and when
Open
they
it
do,
and read
they'll
it.
be cursed. Like, they're going to tear down this altar, they're going to find this stone, they're going to open it up, and that's going to unleash a curse.
It makes sense from, like, Joshua's view of what God was, because Joshua was the one that marched around the city. I don't remember which city for 7 rounds marching around it, and then the walls fell down and they went and raped and killed people. Jericho.
I had to think about what city it was.
I wanted to say Nineveh, but that's Jonah.
Yeah, Joshua was a warlord, wasn't he?
They went and killed people.
In Deuteronomy, Moses tells the nations that when they finally enter the land of Israel, they should recite blessings at the flowering mountain Gerizim and curses at the opposite mountain, the barren Mount Ebal. So there are 2 mountains. One of them they should recite blessings, and the other one they should recite curses. And
that's in the Bible in Daniel.
Apparently,
that makes a lot of sense. It must be connected.
That's in Deuteronomy 11:26 and 29. I've never read that, but I mean, clearly my family read it to me when I was a kid, but I don't remember that.
Deuteronomy, I can't even say it, is like the one that has so much, like, you may not do this.
Yes,
and so,
it's just a bunch of Israelite law.
Yeah, and a bunch of, like, laws and names, right? I don't know if it's names, but it's boring. I've never read it either.
It's super weird, right? Some of the stuff they outlawed in Deuteronomy was so weird. Like, and that was the one that contained "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." That's where the Bible verse about homosexuality is, or "Thou shalt not lie with a man as one does a woman."
Where polyester.
Polyester, absolutely. Like almost all excavations, Zertal left behind piles of excavated soil after examining it after the first season in 1982, which he devoted to removing a mantle of stones that purposely covered. And this is just droning on, and it's not actually very interesting anymore. I don't know why they carried on the article after that. The interesting part has been said. They found this tablet, and I choose to believe that they unleashed an ancient curse.
Maybe. We'll see.
But maybe they found a loophole by x-raying it rather than actually opening it. But also coming up on tonight's show, a Florida pronoun ban. But Bonnie, you had a story about the Chevron doctrine. And this is a topic that interests me a lot because this was a focus of my case with the federal government when they were charging me with operating an unlicensed money transmitting business. My attorney and I filed to have the case dismissed because of recent Supreme Court rulings where the EPA versus someone, where the Supreme Court has said, look, Congress did not, like in 2 sentences, give the EPA the authority to completely regulate and control this entirely new industry that didn't even exist then. Like, there's no way that this regulation, that this authorization exists. The Chevron deference is the opposite of that, whereas, like, if the government does not say you cannot do something, then the regulatory body can do it. Like, if the EPA is not told that they cannot do something, then they can do it. Whereas the more modern way of looking at things with this new Supreme Court is if the government has not specifically said you can do it, then you can't. And
but the problem is Chevron hasn't completely been overturned. It's not like people can't use that as, it's not like the agencies suddenly aren't allowed to make up rules. They're still allowed to make up rules, but this EPA one kind of weakened it.
It did. And something is going to have to be fought to the Supreme Court to find out exactly how much precedent the EPA ruling is supposed to have set and whether or not the Chevron deference has just been completely thrown out. And I suspect, based on what I'm seeing, it's going to be Ian Freeman's appeal regarding cryptocurrency and the Treasury or FinCEN. FinCEN is the one that has the regulatory framework, and because we argued.
I hope it's before then, but
I would hope so. We argued that by authorizing FinCEN to blah 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 blah, the U.S. government did not give them the authority to regulate cryptocurrency
because the laws. You understand this. You probably understand this, but the listener might not understand. The laws that Ian and the Crypto 6 and Aria were charged with are about money transmission, and they were written during the Patriot Act times, which is like 2001. What is that? 8 years before cryptocurrency was even invented. So there's no possible way that those laws have anything to do with cryptocurrency, and yet the judge allowed it because he didn't want to make a
He said
there's a specific type of
applying
ruling.
the EPA ruling in this way would be a novel ruling, was the word he kept using over and over again. He didn't want to make a precedent, basically, and most judges at that level don't, right? That's for the appeal courts to sort out and stuff.
It seems kind of frustrating, but it's not like Judge LaPlante did anything wrong or unusual. But
right, he did his job.
Yeah. So basically, they said cryptocurrency. He could see it being used. The word is used in the law that they supposedly broke is funds, and the judge said, I can see cryptocurrency being funds, and therefore I'm not going to make this ruling in favor of Arya. And because of that, Arya decided to take a plea deal because it's like that was going to be the reason that she thought she could win.
Right.
Yeah.
That's an excellent summary. I was convinced that I was going to beat that charge, and the other ones I wasn't overly worried about. Like the money laundering charge, not worried about it. The wire fraud charge, not worried about it. But the operating unlicensed money transmitting business, like that was the one where I was like, if they're going to convict me on something, it's going to be that one. And so once we lost that, I was like, well, that's it. They've made their decision. They've defined money transmission in this way. And it doesn't matter that the way everyone understands money transmission is that it requires a third party. Like you giving me $100 to go to your grandmother in Arkansas and give her $100, that's money transmission. That's transmitting money from one person to another, right? That's what you use. Western Union is money transmission. Walmart to Walmart, whatever they call it, is money transmission. All of those sorts of things are money transmission. But it was our understanding, it was my understanding at least, that Bitcoin, selling Bitcoin to someone was not money transmission because there is no third party. But anyway, we lost that ruling, and I assume Ian is going to appeal it. I don't know. I don't even know where appeals and stuff like that get filed, but it's not on it's not right there in the current case under recap. So I don't know where all of that goes in the judicial system.
You can't appeal until after sentencing.
Really?
Yeah, because if the judge said, like, I'm just going to give you time served, lots of people would choose not to appeal. Like, oh, okay, that's fine. I'm not going to appeal.
I guess that makes sense.
I did not know that. But that's what your story is on. And that's all the background about why I care about the Chevron deference and the EPA ruling and all of that. So
it's a really important thing for just like lots of people. It's interesting to us because it directly relates to the Crypto 6 case. But basically, this from The Hill from May 1st. Supreme Court to consider overruling Chevron doctrine. Just overruling it, which would be great.
Yeah, that would be excellent news.
The Supreme Court on Monday announced it will hear a case that could significantly scale back federal agencies' authority, with major implications for the future of environmental and other regulations. The justices' next term will consider whether to overturn a decades-old precedent that grants agencies deference when Congress left ambiguity in a statute. Named for the court's decision in Chevron USA versus Natural Resources Defense Council, the Chevron deference has become one of the most frequently cited precedents in administrative law since the decision was first handed down in 1984.
And it's easy to understand why. What it basically says is anytime there's ambiguity, the government has the authority to do it. That's basically what the Chevron...
whatever little unelected agency bureaucrats gets to decide what the law means.
603-283-6160. There's more coming up here. It is Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live.
So that's what government does, right? It's a tool of force. It's a coercive monopoly. It's a violent monopoly. And whoever's in charge gets to wield it for their benefit. They get to promote their views and force them down the throat of everybody else. They get to extract money from everybody and use it to benefit their friends.
Let's outlaw democracy instead of outlawing Islam.
That would make more sense. Outlawing government would make more sense than trying to ban people from coming to what at one time was the greatest plot of land on the entire earth. I don't know if it can make that. I don't know if we can make that claim anymore.
But the evidence is that it cannot claim to be the freest, economically freest country in earth. All you have to do is look at the Conservative Heritage Foundation's numbers. And you can go to freetheworld.com, look there too. The fact is, the United States, not the freest country in the world. Sorry.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern. Live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. World leaders are arriving in Japan for the G7 summit being held in Hiroshima this week. The 3-day talks are expected to address global security and financial challenges, including enhancing sanctions on Russia and reducing economic reliance on China. FSN's Chris Gilbert reports from Tokyo.
For Japan's Prime Minister and this year's G7 host, Fumio Kishida, months of planning and organization are about to be put into practice. The summit's being held in his hometown of Hiroshima, which was hit by an American nuclear bomb in 1945. Kishida reportedly chose the venue to promote peace and nuclear disarmament. He's made several personal trips to visit his G7 peers in Europe and North America this year to lay the groundwork for the meeting. The agenda is expected to focus on reducing G7 countries' reliance on Chinese exports, increasing financial pressure on Russia to hamper its ability to continue fighting in Ukraine, and reaching out to global South countries to diversify supply lines. It'll wrap up with a joint statement on Sunday.
U.S. President Joe Biden says a deal on raising the debt ceiling won't happen until he returns from that G7 summit. Biden spoke to reporters before he left Washington on Wednesday morning. He said he plans to hold a press conference on his return on Sunday. He has canceled his Australia leg of his trip to continue negotiations on trying to raise the U.S.'s borrowing limit to prevent an unprecedented default.
I'll be in constant contact with my team while I'm at the G7, and I'll be in close touch with Speaker McCarthy and other leaders as well. Now, what I have done, in anticipation that we won't get it all done till I get back, is I've cut my trip short in order to be for the final negotiations and sign the deal with the majority leader. And we're going to continue these discussions with congressional leaders in the coming days until we reach an agreement, and I'll have more to say about that on Sunday.
U.S. stocks surged on Wednesday, fueled by hopes that U.S. lawmakers will reach a deal to raise the debt ceiling. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says the government may be unable to pay its bills as early as June 1st. FSN's William Denzelo reports from New York.
In remarks at the White House, US President Joe Biden said he was confident a deal will be reached on the budget and that the country won't default on its debt. And speaking to CNBC House Speaker Kevin McCarthy also expressed optimism a deal could be reached. That gave Wall Street a boost during trading hours, with the Dow and S&P both ending the day up 1.2% and the Nasdaq up 1.3%. There was also robust economic data out, showing that new home construction ticked up 2.2% in April. In company news, Target rose over 2.5% on stronger than expected earnings.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, the author Salman Rushdie in his own words. The novelist who survived an assassination attempt in New York last August made a video appearance this week at the British Book Awards, where he was honoured with the Freedom to Publish Award. We have not seen very much of the author of the Satanic Verses since he narrowly survived a stabbing by an Islamic extremist during an appearance last August in New York State. While he's lost the sight in one eye, he was unsparing in his defense of his craft.
It's quite remarkably alarming to see publishers looking to, how shall I put this, Baudelarize the work of such people as Roald Dahl and Ian Fleming. I have to say, the idea that James Bond could be made politically correct is almost comical. I think that has to be resisted. Books have to come to us from their time and be of their time. And if that's difficult to take, don't read it. Read another book. But don't try and remake yesterday's work in the light of today's attitudes.
Salman Rushdie struggles to write these days, but told The New Yorker recently that he still has gratitude that most of his more severe injuries have responded to treatment. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
The main news again. World leaders begin arriving in Japan for the G7 summit expected to address global security and financial challenges. Joe Biden says a deal on raising the U.S.'s debt ceiling won't happen until he returns from his trip to Japan. And U.S. stocks surge on hopes that lawmakers are close to reaching a deal to raise the debt ceiling and avoid an unprecedented default. That is the latest feature story news. Ira Spitzer reporting.
Bewildered paralegal Caitlin Levy says that after returning home from work today, it occurred to her that oddly at no point during her day was she harassed, leered at, or made to feel humiliated or physically threatened.
It's weird. Looking back on it, I suddenly realized that not one strange man made a creepy comment at me or an obscene gesture or a sleazy look for like the whole day. How can that be?
The 29-year-old told reporters that even at points in her day when she is traditionally almost certain to be made uncomfortable by at least one or two leering male strangers, not a single such instance occurred.
I actually got to walk from the train to my office and never once catch some weirdo smiling at me or looking me up and down or slowing down his car to yell some shit out the window at me. I felt weirdly safe or something.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, and you can join us 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And with you tonight, it's Aria, Bonnie, and Nikki. And I want to say thank you to someone whose name I just had in front of me, and then I just put away because, you know, I'm terrible at my job. And that person would be, it's Roger Paxton. Didn't even need a list for that. Roger Paxton is tonight's amplifier. That means Roger is a member. I'm not going to misgender Roger. I know Roger's gender. Roger's a he. That means he contributes to the AMPS program. That's amps.freetalklive.com. That's our Patreon. So if you like the show, you want to show your support, the Patreon is the best way to do that. It only takes $5 per month. That gets you in. Roger, though, he's giving $10 per month. He's a gold level member. We don't ask that again, although we do certainly appreciate it. So thank you so much for Roger. Haven't kept too close of an eye on Roger since he left New Hampshire. I think he moved to Tennessee.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly. And
he was a Free Stater. He used to run PorcFest, and he's really cool. He wrote a great letter for
awesome.
Ian to the judge.
But he used to run like Pax Libertas Productions and some other stuff, and I briefly had a podcast on Pax Libertas Productions, but my co-host at the time, it was, what were we calling it? The Libertine... the Anarchist Shemale and the Libertine MILF was the name of the show. And
sounds great.
I mean, it was, right? But she only came out for like the one episode, and I was never able to get her out for another. And I hate it when that happens. So that podcast ultimately ended up going nowhere. But it was a lot of fun. But Roger, thank you for that opportunity. You know, it made things easier that I already had that sort of connection to some extent when I first came to New Hampshire, when I first came to PorcFest, and I met Roger actually there in person. He actually ran the first PorcFest that I ever attended, the first Porcupine Freedom Festival that I ever actually attended. He was the Dennis Pratt of that PorcFest, which when I say that, I mean Dennis Pratt is the person who's
the producer,
the organizer.
I think is what they call it.
And that year it was Roger Paxton. Awesome guy. Roger, thank you so much for your support. That's amps.freetalklive.com. If you want to join, that's amps.freetalklive.com. So we're talking here about the Chevron deference, which, again, I used bad terminology previously. Basically, you got all of these regulatory agencies like the EPA, FinCEN, the IRS, countless other 3-letter agencies, right? And the Chevron deference is, look, if Congress has not said that you cannot do something, that the EPA cannot regulate something, or that the IRS cannot regulate something, then the IRS can regulate it, or fencing can regulate it, or whatever. But
I mean, what even constitutes ambiguity? That word is ambiguous.
And that's such obviously bad law. That means in order for us to have a controlled, limited government, Congress has to specify every little thing.
Which is impossible.
These agencies are not allowed to do. No, it's completely impossible. And that's fundamentally the opposite of how the United States is supposed to work. The U.S. Constitution specifically states like 8 things the U.S. government is allowed to do. And everything else, it specifically says they're not allowed to do.
It's not them. It's 3-letter agencies.
Right.
It's like a workaround.
It is, because Article 2, Section 8, which is where they outline the various things that Congress can do, it's very, very short. It's not even a full page of stuff that they're allowed to regulate and stuff that they're allowed to control. And it specifically says, the 10th Amendment, that anything that's not specifically authorized to the U.S. government is therefore authorized to the states and to the people. So that's it. If the government does not say you can do so, if the Constitution does not say you can do something, then you, the government, cannot do it. The Chevron deference is fundamentally counter to all of that. It says if they haven't said that you can't, then the EPA is authorized to do it.
But luckily now the justices are going to take up a case that explicitly asks them to overturn Chevron. The High Court announced the move on Monday in a brief unsigned order, as is typical, indicating at least 4 justices agreed to take up the case.
Okay, well that's definitely encouraging.
Herring fishing company Loper Bright Enterprises is appealing a ruling that left in place a National Marine Fisheries Service, NMFS, regulation based on the doctrine, Chevron.
That's really interesting. I mean, it wouldn't do me any good, but it would do. Ian's going to have to appeal his either way, right? Like, even if the Supreme Court does this and they repeal the Chevron deference, he's still going to have to actually do his appeal. It'll just make it easier for him to win. But they're not going to say, okay, well, you win and your appeal, the conviction's done out. Like, he's still going to fight the appeal. But so the Chevron deference being repealed by the Supreme Court doesn't mean anything to me. But Ian winning his appeal would mean a lot to me, because I did take a plea deal, right? And there are almost no scenarios in which you can appeal a plea deal. However, the Supreme Court saying that this governmental body did not have authorization to do this in the first place, that's one of the 3 things that I can appeal on. The other one is like not having confidence in my attorney, or some sort of obvious malfeasance in the court system or something like that. And I have a phenomenal trust in my attorney. He did a fantastic job, so I could never argue that. However, the appeal thing, if Ian wins his appeal, then I can appeal my plea deal. And it's very unlikely in most circumstances that one can ever appeal a plea deal. And it won't do anything for any of the other 4 or any of the other 3 of the Crypto 6 who took plea deals. Well, yeah, because if he wins his wire fraud appeals, then that would help them.
Oh, okay, I see.
But the Chevron deference is not going to help them in regard to the wire fraud. And I don't know how that's all going to go, but I'm obviously, for personal reasons, I'm watching the appeal here very closely. But based on how all of this goes, like, at best, I might be able to get my conviction purged.
Yeah, and you'll still go to prison for a year or whatever.
I bought a countdown timer, right? Because I thought it would be a good idea to have this at the Porcupine Freedom Festival there at our Free Talk Live site, a LED countdown timer that is counting down to the second that I have to be in prison. Right?
That makes me anxious just thinking about that.
It's a conversation starter.
That was my thinking, right? And I was like, this would be cool, right? But I did study, and I was like, well, I'm going to go. I'm curious.
You're going to have to look at it.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, I was like, I want to see what it's like right now. So I did the math, and I put it in. And watching this thing count down from 40 days and 21 hours, I'm like, no,
I hate that.
This is going to drive me nuts.
Yeah.
But I don't just hate having a timer of this is when I have to leave for work or whatever. No, this is a timer on when I have to go to prison.
Yeah,
So-
that's very different.
It's a little over 40 days out. So
It's like you get to come home after work. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, you get to come home after you go to jail, but that's
eventually.
Eventually, yeah.
But yeah, even when Ian wins his appeal, like I'm gonna already have served my prison time. So
And that's the thing. The process a lot of time is the punishment. Like even if Ian gets to stay out on appeal, he's been in home jail for like 3 years, and it's
Yeah.
really annoying.
yeah.
He's not allowed to leave the state.
And it's a long legal battle, right? That's why I'm not appealing my sentencing, though. A lot of people say, you got to appeal this sentence. I'm like, well, first of all, the judge like way under sentenced me. The guidelines were 30 months. I barely got half that. The prosecutors were arguing for 37. They got less than half of what they want. I'm not happy to go to prison, but like based on the numbers, the judge went way under the sentencing guidelines in order to sentence me.
I also think it's good for your mental health to have that perspective. You know what I mean? Like if you were to just be super negative about everything, what good is that going to do you? You know,
It's not going to change anything.
I'm trying to stay positive, right?
Like you should have perspective.
Yeah.
I think it's important and healthy.
So, even when all these appeals take place, and I'm not appealing my sentence. That's what I was getting at, because by the time I would be in a courtroom arguing that, I would have already served my time and gotten released, and presumably would be carrying on with my life. And like the reason that I moved forward with the hearing on that day, even though my attorney was like, "Look, the judge is going to incarcerate you if we proceed with this today. We have to put it off because they're going to use this stuff at trial and blah blah blah. We need 90 more days." I was like, "No, we're moving forward today because having it hanging over you, it's not good. I want it behind me. I want to move forward, not backward. And I don't want to stay in the present. I want to move forward." And that was the only way of moving forward. And I don't want to hang here in the present with the sentencing. I want to move forward. I even looked into the possibility of starting my prison sentence early. Like I contacted my attorney and my supervising officer. I was like, "Hey, look, so what has to happen here for me to like start serving my sentence this month? Because 1 month starting soon. If I start 1 month sooner, then I get out 1 month sooner, and that's good for me, right?"
Yeah.
But it would require a court order from the judge and all this other nonsense.
Too much. Yeah.
I was like,
by the time you get all that, it'll be June.
Well, it's not that important, right? Like if it was not a big deal, and once I had everything out of the way, sure, I would like to be able to just turn up and like, all right, well, here we go, because I have to report by 2 p.m. on June the 27th, right? But that's by that day at that time. So presumably anytime before that, I would be able to, but no, they did not like that idea at all. And like, I don't want to go to jail, but I'm going to have to. And it's not really doing me any favors to put it off by another month or whatever.
And what I was going to say about your sentencing, I mean, there's really, even if you did postpone it and you were able to review whatever about Ian's trial, there's still no guarantee that it would be any different. You know, that the end result...
I think it would have been worse because the judge didn't use anything from the trial in the sentencing.
That's actually a great point, yeah.
And if we had made this big deal about it and requested a 90-day extension specifically for this particular subject, the prosecutors would have used evidence at trial because they would have had 90 days to prepare for it.
Yeah, it made it way worse.
Yeah, so they have 90 days, too.
Right. So I think it would have been way worse to have held off for another 90 days. And, now that I'm one step closer to moving forward with my life.
Yeah.
And that's important to me. So what else is going on with these Chevron deferrals? It's just that the Supreme Court...
There was just a couple more paragraphs about that specific herring fishing companies, their reason for wanting to overturn it. Their attorney says, nearly 4 decades of judicial experience with Chevron have demonstrated that courts are incapable of applying its two-step Chevron framework in a consistent manner.
Nice. Well, I hope he's successful in getting that undone because in other cryptocurrency news... if I can find it, there's a lot happening in cryptocurrency, right? Like the stuff against the Crypto 6 was only one minor thing. The SEC was going after LBRY at the same time. They've been going after Ripple. They've been going after people for years from localbitcoins.com. The U.S. government is targeting cryptocurrency. Well,
exchanges are leaving the U.S. Local Bitcoins doesn't exist anymore.
They aren't, and I can't say that I blame them. And SEC and Coinbase are having a bit of a spat, and Coinbase is suing the SEC. And I don't know how to feel about this, right? It's the devil. Coinbase is the devil, right? They are. But they're also fighting the devil, which is the government. So, like, who do I root for?
Choose your demon.
Yeah, I was going to say they're probably just different demons.
So who do I root for here? Like, Coinbase winning would be a good thing for me and the things I believe in, not because of Coinbase, but because it means the government loses, and the government is worse. Okay. Yeah,
well, that's the thing. Government always the worst.
Yeah, government is worse for the things I believe in than Coinbase is, except for the fact that Coinbase wants to use that worst government to do the things that they want to do, which is counter to the things I want.
Probably not.
I can't possibly win. Well, I could win, right? It would be better. What did you say, Bonnie?
I said maybe Coinbase would learn their lesson if they win against the government and then be like, yeah, let's not do what we've been doing. But I doubt it.
I wish, right?
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to happen, unfortunately.
I know, but that would be the best possible outcome of this. I was still trying to process my thoughts and how I felt about this when you said that, and my brain went,
You're
wait
like,
a minute.
wait, somebody else said something.
Well, it wasn't just someone else said something. Like, someone else just said something that's actually, like, really hopeful, and we need to find out what that was. So I would love to see that happen. But the SEC, that chair, that's Gary Gensler. I think his name is Gary. It's Gensler at the very least. He's clapping back at Coinbase. Says that crypto rules already exist.
Does this article say clapping back?
Yeah.
That's disgusting.
Yeah.
Gary Gensler claps back. I want to fire whoever wrote that.
Yeah, I wasn't
How old
too
are they? We need to know. Is there an age?
They're too old to be writing headlines like that.
I really don't
tell you
like that. Anyways.
So what's been going on with the SEC and cryptocurrency is that the SEC refuses to, there are no cryptocurrency regulations and crypto rules. Coinbase tried becoming SEC compliant, and the SEC said, well, Coinbase, what do you think you should do? So Coinbase was like, this is it. This is the moment we've been waiting for. So they brought in their attorneys and all of their dudes to sit around, and they thought that they were getting to write the laws that were going to govern cryptocurrency and crypto exchanges in the United States, because that's what they were trying to do from the beginning. So they presented these things to the SEC. So these are the things that we think a company should have to do, and these are the things that we've done. So and SEC said, yeah, no, that's not it, and then sued them.
That's hilarious, honestly.
It kind of is, right? Like, I enjoy seeing the devil suffer, and that's...
Well, it's an important lesson. Like, this is what happens when you try to work with the government to screw over other people. Like...
Yeah.
You have to realize that they're always going to screw you over, and they're always going to be more powerful. So, unfortunately, that's what happens.
So, the Coinbase sent, lobbyists into Washington like a year ago, maybe 2 years ago at this point, and they were able to meet with all of these regulatory agencies except the SEC. The SEC refused to meet with them. And I think that should be a sign of where things are. The SEC, of course, out of control. Gensler, out of control. He's even been brought in front of Congress, and we played some of the videos here where some congressional official was just ripping him to shreds because of his behavior as the leader of the SEC and how he has created a distinct lack of clarity in crypto regulations. He's created a climate of fear, and he's chasing business and money out of the United States with his actions and ingenuity.
Isn't he the one that changed his profile picture on Twitter to like a Doge with sunglasses, meaning like
Gary Gensler?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It was somebody from the SEC. They changed it was like the day after a victory of the SEC, they changed their profile picture to like a Doge with sunglasses, meaning like LOL.
What is it? What is it supposed to be, like opposite of the laser eyes or something? Is that the point?
The point was, haha, gotcha, which is really messed up.
No, from what I'm seeing here, he's just a normal looking evil dude. There's no Dogecoin or
it might have not been
anything.
Doge. It might have been like this other meme of a little boy that gets sunglasses. But either way, somebody from the SEC changed their profile picture to this meme that basically means haha, trolled, haha, pwned.
I believe
haha,
it.
I win.
I mean, that sounds like the SEC, but it doesn't appear to have been him. And if it was him, he changed it. He doesn't seem like the kind of guy who's got a sense of humor, though. So anyway, the chair of the U.S. I'm sorry?
I said it's not even funny. It's dirty.
Yeah, true. The chair of the SEC has hit back at Coinbase's petition compelling the agency to provide a clear stance on crypto regulation. Coinbase even got the Commerce, the Chamber of Commerce from the U.S. government, to sign their petition, agreeing that the SEC needs to provide clarity. Because the SEC argues there are already adequate laws in place. In a May the 15th keynote speech at some conference, Gensler was asked about the dispute with Coinbase, the rules on crypto, and, quote, why the SEC doesn't publish rules for that market. In response, Gensler staunchly asserted that the rules have already been published, although they haven't.
And there was literally a lady from the SEC, I don't know her name, that was in a video being interviewed, and she was like, the reason that we are not clear about the rules is because that would create a framework for people to follow to avoid the rules. So that's why we're unclear.
But that doesn't even make sense.
They're completely crazy, right?
Because how do you follow the rules if there is no guide? Like, the opposite point could also be made.
Well, if people know the rules, then they'll know how to get around the rules, so that's why they just cannot publish the rules.
So basically, they're like, we just want to arrest everybody and we want to ruin all of your lives.
That's
so
pretty
that's
much
why
exactly
we can't.
it.
Yeah, so that's why we can't, tell you the rules because...
Gensler stood in front of Congress and he refused to answer whether or not Ethereum was a security. Right? They asked him point blank, well, is Bitcoin a security? And he has said that Bitcoin is not a security. But he won't say that about any of the others. And in a lot of them, he won't even answer. He will say, he said that
Does he know what these things are? Like, who is this guy?
He's the chair of the SEC, the Security
but like,
and
does he
Exchange
know
Commission.
anything about cryptocurrency?
Of course not. All he knows is, look at him.
So if they ask him about Ethereum, how do we even know that he knows what Ethereum is?
Well, he probably has a cursory knowledge, right? Like, it's his job to crack down on cryptocurrencies, or at least that's what he thinks it is. So he probably has some understanding of what Ethereum is. It's a cryptocurrency, right? And it's a blockchain platform on which tokens and smart contracts exist.
He's probably just being very careful to not say anything because it's involved in a certain case he wants to bring up soon or something like that.
I think it's because he doesn't want to limit his power. If he says that Ethereum is not a security, then he means that he won't be able to target Ethereum.
I don't know if that would even limit anything because in the library case, they repeatedly used a unpaid intern's Reddit, not even intern, an unpaid volunteer moderator on library's Reddit page. They used his statements as an argument against library multiple times, but they would not accept actual statements from like the head of the SEC and other people who were involved in the SEC as evidence. And the judge allowed all that. Oh, that doesn't mean anything that they said that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that happened with library and the SEC, it was heartbreaking to watch. And it's been happening for a very long time. And Jeremy's a friend of mine. I've hated to see this happen.
It was really sad. I went to one hearing and it was just really sad.
Jeremy created a beautiful piece of technology called Library that allows you to share files and information across the internet in a decentralized way without having to go through the Pirate Bay for torrenting or any of these other shady torrenting sites. There's none of that.
And the good thing about it is whatever the SEC did do to them, which sucks, Library still exists.
Library does still exist.
And it can't be taken away. Can't just go away.
So,
it's a protocol.
I haven't really been following that. Like, I knew this was all going on, but what was the...
They argued that Library Credits, LBC, was a security. And that Library, the company, by creating and selling Library Credits, promised people or suggested that people would make a profit with these library credits.
I mean, they didn't, though. I guess
the court ruled that they did. I don't know if they did or not. I didn't see any of the evidence. It doesn't sound to me like something they would do because that's silly. It's like, hey, buy some library credits because they're useful and they allow you to post content onto the library platform, which is what they're for, because they're a utility token. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I never heard anyone in
like,
library
it wasn't
say,
like, oh, like you're going to get rich. Like, this is an investment. Like, it wasn't portrayed like that at all.
It was always that I saw library credits were purchased and advertised and
given
promoted
away.
and largely given away. Yes. Specifically to promote strength in the library platform. Like, in order to put your file on the library network and make it available to other people, you had to have library credits. So that was the reason you wanted library credits, not to hodl them and then sell them for a profit. That was why they were being sued, because the federal government was arguing that the possibility of being able to make money off of it made it a security. It was a complete travesty. 603-283-6160.
I've been told no in many different ways.
I give you an order and you're going to obey it.
George, you can go this way. You can't do that and you have to leave here.
You cannot bring signs into the rally.
Walk with me. Well, I'm comfortable here, actually. Whoa, hey, who do you think you are? Excuse me.
There is no video and audio allowed in this office.
No, I have work today.
You ain't gonna make it. Wait
a minute.
Hey! Oh my God! Unbelievable!
Why are you running from me? Because you're scared me. What am I being detained for?
You're being served.
What is this?
You're being served.
What is this? Bureaucrats have a funny way of telling people no.
That's the sound of the men working on the chain.
Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree. Watch it for free and order the Director's Cut DVD at victimlesscrimespree.com.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. World leaders are arriving in Japan for the G7 summit being held in Hiroshima this week. The three-day talks are expected to address global security and financial challenges, including enhancing sanctions on Russia and reducing economic reliance on China. FSN's Chris Gilbert reports from Tokyo.
For Japan's Prime Minister and this year's G7 host, Fumio Kishida, months of planning and organization are about to be put into practice. The summit's being held in his hometown of Hiroshima, which was hit by an American nuclear bomb in 1945. Kishida reportedly chose the venue to promote peace and nuclear disarmament. He's made several personal trips to visit his G7 peers in Europe and North America this year to lay the groundwork for the meeting. The agenda is expected to focus on reducing G7 countries' reliance on Chinese exports, increasing financial pressure on Russia to hamper its ability to continue fighting in Ukraine, and reaching out to global South countries to diversify supply lines. It'll wrap up with a joint statement on Sunday.
U.S. President Joe Biden says a deal on raising the debt ceiling won't happen until he returns from that G7 summit. Biden spoke to reporters before he left Washington on Wednesday morning. He said he plans to hold a press conference on his return on Sunday. He has canceled his Australia leg of his trip to continue negotiations on trying to raise the U.S.'s borrowing limit to prevent an unprecedented default.
I'll be in constant contact with my team while I'm at the G7, and I'll be in close touch with Speaker McCarthy and other leaders as well. Now, what I have done, in anticipation that we won't get it all done till I get back, is I've cut my trip short in order to be for the final negotiations and sign the deal with the majority leader. And we're going to continue these discussions with congressional leaders in the coming days until we reach an agreement, and I'll have more to say about that on Sunday.
U.S. stocks surged on Wednesday, fueled by hopes that U.S. lawmakers will reach a deal to raise the debt ceiling. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says the government may be unable to pay its bills as early as June 1st. FSN's William Denzelo reports from New York.
In remarks at the White House, US President Joe Biden said he was confident a deal will be reached on the budget and that the country won't default on its debt. And speaking to CNBC House Speaker Kevin McCarthy also expressed optimism a deal could be reached. That gave Wall Street a boost during trading hours, with the Dow and S&P both ending the day up 1.2% and the Nasdaq up 1.3%. There was also robust economic data out, showing that new home construction ticked up 2.2% in April. In company news, Target rose over 2.5% on stronger than expected earnings.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is...
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, and there's still time if you want to get on the air with us. You're more than welcome. 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And you know, Dash has given us $32 Dash per month to promote their cryptocurrency, their usable cryptocurrency, their one with actually usable fees. As I've heard about Bitcoin, and again, it's been like 2.5 years at this point. 2 years and 3 months since I used cryptocurrency, and man, that hurts, right? Like, I love cryptocurrency enough that I'm basically about to go to prison for it. Like, this is something that's very important to me, and it has meant a lot to me throughout the last 7, 8, 9, 10 years. I don't know exactly how long I've been watching and into cryptocurrency, but it's been a very long time. And I can't touch the stuff. And that hurts. That's like a musician being, and I am a musician, that's like a musician being told, you can't make music for 2 years and 3 months. It's like, dude, that's going to drive them crazy. Now, cryptocurrency isn't an expressive outlet for me, but it still sucks. But anyway, so Dash was usable as a cryptocurrency even then. All of the stores around here in Keene that took cryptocurrency, they all took Dash. They all took Bitcoin. They all took Bitcoin Cash. Some of them took some others. Some of them would take Monero. Some of them would take Litecoin. Actually, none of them ever actually took Litecoin, which was frustrating because I had some Litecoin and like none of these stores wanted anything to do with it, except what was then Route 101 Goods, but they just took it and flipped it into Bitcoin. So it was nice that they took Litecoin, but Litecoin was supported by AnyPay, which was the app that all the stores around here used. Dash was the big one, and Bitcoin Cash was the other big one that were just widely used. If you went to one of the crypto meetups or you just went to one of these places that accepted cryptocurrency, you were almost certainly going to see someone using Bitcoin Cash or Dash to make their purchase, not Bitcoin or Litecoin or Monero or anything else. But so we've always been big fans of Dash here because it is a usable cryptocurrency, and the Dash Decentralized Autonomous Organization is giving us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash. And the reason we have to say that is because of the SEC. Now, it's obvious when we're promoting something on the show, it's obvious that we're promoting it because we're being paid to promote it, right? But that's not good enough with the SEC. And I realize there's some ambiguity. Like I talk about Windscribe a lot on here and how great it is as a VPN. Again, haven't used it in like 2.5 years, so it may not be that good anymore. But back then, it was really good. I loved Windscribe. But they've never paid us to say that. And it's never been something that we promoted on Free Talk Live. It's just a VPN that I happen to like. And when I talk about Windscribe, I would expect most people out there to just assume it's something that has been advertised or promoted as someone who is paying us to advertise it. But it's not. It's just something I care about. But there's a difference between occasionally bringing up something and like consistently doing what is very clearly a live read, which is what we do with Dash. But that's not good enough with the SEC. This is why they went after, who was it? Who was that dumb
Lindsay
chick?
Lohan?
Yeah.
She's not dumb.
The other one then.
Well, no, they would. That's
Kim
Kardashian. Went after,
that's it.
They went after Lindsay Lohan too, and all she did was say like,
wasn't it the same thing?
It was the same thing. Yes.
Yeah.
But they went after both them for like the same thing.
I don't know enough about Lindsay Lohan to call her dumb. Kim Kardashian though, I know enough about her to call her dumb.
She's really smart too. But okay.
Kim Kardashian?
Yes.
I strongly disagree. Her father was smart. Her father
She's
got
a lawyer
out of jail.
too.
But she didn't go to law. Like I don't know.
She went to law school. She just hasn't passed the baby bar yet.
I don't think she's intelligent.
Did she go to law school?
And it's not just about being smart. It's about, being a lawyer. It's about that she has turned, I don't want to say what, her tape into like...
Her sex tape, right.
She's like one of the richest people in the world. You know, that type of thing. It's not just about...
there's nothing wrong with having a sex tape.
No, she's
It's not just that she
That's
had
not
a
what
sex
makes
tape.
her stupid.
It's not just that she had a sex tape. It's that she, if you can say that on the radio.
Yeah, we can say sex tape on the radio.
Okay, it's that she turned it into not just a 15 minutes of fame. She is like a crazy, savvy businesswoman. Smart
I was under the impression that was Kris Jenner.
Well, Kris Jenner definitely helped her with that, but it's not like Kris Jenner runs every single one of her businesses or has the personality that Kim Kardashian has turned into a empire.
All right, I'll backpedal. I honestly don't know enough about Kim Kardashian to say that she's stupid either.
And I don't know that she is good at math.
She's a goblin though.
Oh yes, she is a goblin. Wait, is it a hobbit?
Yeah, that's a hobbit. Yeah, but I don't know if she's stupid. You are right. That's not fair for me to call her
She's shorter than me.
stupid.
She's really short.
Yeah,
but
you're not a
Kim Kardashian.
Yeah,
really?
Kim
and
she's
shorter than you. Okay, I misheard that. I was like, yeah, but you're not a dumpy little hobbit. So.
Dumpy.
Well, she is.
She's shorter than me and probably weighs like 50 more pounds than me.
Oh my God, that's rough. Butt
it's the butt implants.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
South Park eviscerated both her and Ye. Like those two, I've never seen South Park just like do that to someone.
I don't get it. Of course I like fish sticks. Who doesn't like fish sticks?
Yeah, they did a whole song for Ye. Back then he was Kanye, and he was a gay fish, and it's so good what they did. And him doing his music videos, he come to terms with being married to a hobbit. It's South Park at some of their best. Have you never seen it?
No.
Oh my God, you got to look into it. It's so good. But we are calling the show here in 603-283-6160 if you want to join us. Again, that's 603-283-6160.
To be fair, I was only saying Lindsay Lohan isn't stupid because I like her.
That's fair. I mean, that's it. She's probably not stupid either, though.
And she's just like, oh my God. I didn't know Sarah was on.
Yeah, I hit the on-air button, but then you said, well, to be fair, so I let you go. And then
go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, yeah.
Do whatever that was.
Albuquerque, we have this service aid patrol cars. I don't know. We send out social workers to remedy the homeless situation.
Her and Richard.
How do you remedy the homeless situation, Sarah? Tell me more about this.
I mean, it's I'm really, they figured out, like, they sent a cop out, and it's some homeless people that just got knocked out on the sidewalk or something, and they're not like. Then they get intimidated. They're
by the cops.
They're afraid. They don't want to beat them up and take them to jail, that kind of stuff. So they actually got a social worker patrol. And I've seen these cars, and then they help them out with water, and then ask them, do you need help?
So I want to make sure I understand this correctly. I mean, the police have no reason to be responding to calls like this. The homeless situation in the United States is more often than not is a healthcare crisis or a mental health crisis.
Right, it's something like that. So,
it's something well beyond the ability of the police to respond to. Right?
Low IQ, aggressive toddlers.
Right. I'm with you on this extent.
Police, not the homeless.
We should completely defund the police. Like, get rid of them. Fire them all. Get rid of all of them. Right. And let them go to work in the coal mines or whatever. They don't even have to mine coal. Just give them a pickaxe and some dirt and be like, here you go, chief. And then pay them 50 cents a day or whatever. They're stupid. They'll never know. But we do need...
they would know they didn't have power.
But it would be useful to have some sort of organization that is out there to respond to people who are having mental health crises. And that's not police. It's completely insane. It's completely insane when you think about how the police are the people who respond when your 16-year-old is having a nervous breakdown and threatening to kill themselves.
Like, you would think somebody in more of a counselor role, like somebody with a psychology background... would be far more equipped to handle that situation. And I've heard some people argue, oh, well, what if the person's violent, this, that, and the other thing? I mean, even in my job as a nurse, I've encountered violent patients several times, and
you didn't have to kill them.
I didn't kill them. I didn't even call the cops. We don't even call the cops on them.
Do you mean to tell me that you have never beaten someone's face open with a flashlight?
No.
How do you do your job?
It's amazing. Yeah.
Kudos, Nikki. Clap, golf clap.
So, I mean, it's like, I've seen these cars by the Gateway Center, the new homeless shelter. So they have I've seen about like 10 of those cars at the, about 15 social workers around the cars, getting ready to, when they open up the center.
Yeah, that's great. Sarah, it sounds like New Mexico sucks, but it sounds like you're at least doing this one thing correctly. And that's good. I'm happy to hear that. And thank you so much for the call tonight. It's always good to hear a positive development because the sun and the desert out there, it seems to make you people crazy. And when I say you people, I mean you people who live in the desert where there's 110 degrees sunshine, 120 degrees sunshine, no humidity, and nothing to do except meth.
No humidity is the good part. It's so much hotter in San Antonio in the humidity. It is. It is. I lived there, and I also lived in Utah.
I've been places, and I like humidity better.
It's not that I'm saying like or dislike. It's a known fact. Like Yuma, Arizona is the driest place in the world. I mean, not in the world, in the United States. And they have what's it called? I forget what it's called, but they have their wet season, and it's tons of people die because it's the same temperatures but crazy humid, and that's way hotter than they're actually used to. It's called La Nina, something like that.
I think I can agree with that. I'm from Mississippi, which is borderline tropical rainforest. To be a tropical rainforest, you have to have like an 85% year-round average humidity. And Mississippi is like 79 to 81% year-round. So it's like right under being a tropical rainforest. And it sucks.
Yeah.
Like right now,
I wouldn't want like Florida humid, but
yeah, right now it's probably in the mid-90s there. And it's, I'm going to look up real quick because I'm not sure what
already
it is.
too hot.
But here it's dropping down to freezing tonight. I'm like, what? Now this is insane to me.
Okay, yeah, these are like two opposite ends of the spectrum. Both are bad. Like we just need like 70 degrees, maybe 80.
I stand corrected. It's 70 degrees in Horn Lake, Mississippi right now.
Okay, and it's 30.
Which is right south of Memphis.
What is it, like 35 degrees here? So
but that's the thing I've noticed about like Alabama. I'm not as familiar with Mississippi, but they're right by each other. Is like it never gets temperature. The number never goes up as high as it does in like San Antonio, or especially not like Las Vegas. But
it's 85
it's
tomorrow.
miserable.
They
like,
seem to be having a cool day today.
85 in Alabama is so much worse than 85 in the middle of Utah.
Yeah, they have a humidity of 74% in Horn Lake right now. It's only 70 degrees.
Just
So
half
that's
fish people, I can't stand it.
Yeah,
what is?
Just being in humidity. I mean, it's pretty humid here, but it's just somehow not as bad. Maybe it's because it's only like a few months.
And I think it's because it typically doesn't get as hot. Like, I just really, really do not like dry heat because it just makes your lips chat. Like, even right now where it's very dry here right now. And I can't deal with it.
The whole winter is like terrible for my hands and my feet and my
it's just
lips.
awful. Like, there needs to be a balance. Like, it doesn't have to be Florida, but like we can have some, like 60 degrees with some humidity.
That's why like spring and fall here are amazing. I love it so much.
It's the balance, yeah.
It's turning,
but last
a
year we
cold,
didn't get a spring, and I hated that.
Yeah,
like,
that was so weird.
We went right from me having to turn on the heater to me having to turn on the air conditioner overnight. Like, I haven't even put my air conditioners in yet this year, and it's 30 degrees. It's 27 degrees tonight. Yeah. I'm not putting them in anytime soon.
This has been the best spring since I've lived here.
It's perfect. You just raise the windows up and let it cool off, and you shut them when it gets too cold, and it's perfect. It's so nice having different seasons. Then I look at Mississippi right now where my sister's at, where it's 85 degrees tomorrow. Now, to be fair, we've had a few 80-degree days here and there, but other than today, they had a high of 78 today, but it's just consistently 77, 80 degrees every. They got a low of 64 degrees tonight. And I honestly, hearing that, I'm like, I kind of miss that.
Yeah.
There's something that feels good about going outside at night and it's humid and hot still. There's something that feels so good about that, but then you're like dreading the sun coming up because it's going to be so bad.
I do like that about these summers here because I have a dog, and prior to that, I didn't spend a whole lot of time outside except to, go outside and smoke a cigarette or whatever. But now I have a dog, and there's no better time to like ride my bike with her than at night when it's, 70 degrees. And it's so perfect. It's peaceful. She loves it. I love it. And all you hear is like the slow whirring of the wheels and the little click clack of her nails on the pavement. And she's so good at it. Today, she almost killed me though.
Did she run out in front of it?
No.
Oh.
No. I thought she had already gone number 2, and she hadn't. And when you're walking her and she decides now's the time, that's all. That's the time. It's going to happen. And
press the brakes.
Well, I didn't know that was happening. She just suddenly veered off. She bolted off because she's strong. She's not huge, but she's a full-size golden retriever. She's like, I gotta go, Mom, and she ran out into the grass, and I just went down.
Oh my God!
It was painful. And she just sat there. She's like, sorry. I was like, it's not even your fault. I thought you had just done this a little while ago, but she had, but she did that to me a few days ago.
But she seems to do a good job at it usually. Like the videos you've shown me are just like, wow, my dog could never do that. He would freak out. He hates the moving of
she does a
wheels.
Great job with it. She knows to stay on my right side, and she knows not to go in front of me. Like if I say go around to go to the right side, or not over there or whatever, she knows when I say something that it means she's supposed to trot along beside me, and she does a great job of doing that. Unless she has to poop, in which case God help you. because she did that to me a long time ago too. But she did that to me more recently in Target. It was her first trip ever inside Target, so it was a big deal for her, right? Because Target doesn't allow pets, and she's a service animal in training officially, not an emotional support animal. She's going to be an actual service animal trained to pick stuff up. Because not that I need her to pick stuff up, but she can do that. So I'm going to have her do that. But anyway, so technically she's training to be a support animal. So I took her into Target. She was so good. She just trotted along beside me. And it had been less than 30 minutes since she had pooped. Less than 30 minutes. But it was time.
She did that in Target?
She did.
Oh, God.
And it was
That
awful.
is so embarrassing.
Well, I mean, I didn't find it embarrassing. I mean, she's a dog. She does what dogs do, right? Like,
it would just be like, why now? That's all.
So I took out a baggie and I cleaned it up, and I just so happened to be on the very aisle with Clorox wipes. So I was like,
convenient.
well, we're going to use some of these, and obviously I paid for them afterward, but that it made it super convenient, and it was all done, and then we went back to it, and she's very well behaved. So good on her for that. And I don't remember why we got into all of that. But let's keep going with the phones. We do have a caller on the line. And if I can press the right button, we might actually get that caller on the air. Caller, what's on your name? You're on Free Talk Live.
Hello. I was calling. I had a question for you guys. First off, just want to say, love the show. Love everything y'all do, everything y'all talk about. I grew up very, very far-right conservative. Both parents were preachers. Now yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty far-right conservative.
Yeah, I moved to Tennessee.
Okay.
Met a gal. She lost both of her parents, took custody of her younger brother. Now, her younger brother came out as trans, and
so just so I can be clear, what I don't know how to ask. Okay, so is it a brother now?
It's a sister.
Okay.
Yeah. So, went by David. Now has requested to be called Dawn, and I absolutely am on board with that 100%. I absolutely will support her 100%. Love her to death.
Awesome.
That's never going to change.
That's the most important thing. And as long as she knows that's the only thing that really matters.
Yeah. And the issue that I have is my mom has passed away. She passed away last year, but my father's still alive. And he knows that I have a family here. We're not super close, but after my mom's passing, I'm trying to build back that relationship with him. And I don't know how to explain that to him.
Yeah.
Or how to explain to Dawn that my family is nothing like me.
Well, didn't Dawn grow up in Tennessee? Probably knows enough people that are bigots. They're the ones that, we're going to pass the whole drag queen ban, right?
Yeah.
All right, well, yeah, so she's likely aware that this type of person already exists.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, super sensitive. I am...
Well, you're not responsible for anything your father may believe or say or feel, right? And I suspect that Dawn has noticed that you don't seem to be especially close to your father. Has she ever met your father or anyone else in your family?
No, and I want to make that happen one of these days. My dad's getting up there in age, and she has no significant family. Both parents are gone. The rest of the family's kind of estranged. Got a 80-year-old grandfather that comes to visit every now and then, and he's accepting. But he's not going to be around much longer. And I've got this, this 16-year-old kid. who deals with depression and all of this stuff, mental issues. I mean, we've gone through some stuff involving, like, had to go see a psychiatrist, all of that, just suicidal stuff like that.
Sure. And I mean, it sounds like a stronger sense of community would be good, because I have no family to speak of either. And, a lot of the people here in New Hampshire, a lot of the libertarians don't really have a family to speak of. Like, I don't have, my family in the South doesn't accept me. I don't have anything to do with them. For largely it's the similar reasons that you don't really have anything to do with your family, right? And that Dawn probably doesn't have anything to do with a lot of her family. But here in New Hampshire, I do have a lot of people who provide that same sort of filial connection that a family would otherwise provide.
Okay.
Like I have Matt Roach, who is my brother, Nikki, Bonnie, my sisters, right?
Yeah.
And Ian, my brother. But there's no actual blood relation between any of those. And that sense of community, a lot of people get that from churches. That's one of the reasons that churches are so popular. But we get that from our libertarian community. So it sounds like what could be missing here would be an accepting community that you all could be part of, that could provide Dawn with that sort of grandfather-esque figure without the possible bigotry. Have you asked your father what his perceptions are of trans people?
I grew up until I was probably 18, 19 years old with the whole God hates the gays type of church.
Okay. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Kansas.
Oh.
Yeah, just super right-wing conservative. I mean, and political belief aside, just
right. Now, I know the type of
people.
I know the type of Christians you're talking about, right? So pretty clear then what they think about, what they're going to think about, transsexuals or transgenderism or whatever. So I don't know, that is the only thing I can think of. If the reason you're doing this is because you think that Dawn or whoever else should have a stronger sense of family, I don't think that that's going to come about from what you described your father as being.
It's not necessarily that so much as I am trying to reconnect with my father after, we didn't talk for almost 8 years. So I'm trying to reconnect with my father after my mom's passing. He's come around quite a bit. We had a conversation the other night, and he straight up told me he didn't necessarily, like, he was questioning his faith that he's had since he was a kid.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't want to rock the boat too much because I know he's going through so much. They were married for almost 40 years.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
I don't know, man. And I hate to end the call on that note. Definitely call back some other time, or shoot me an email at aria@freetalklive.com. Maybe I can offer some more insight or something. But
I guess that you gave a good answer. I just don't think family always needs to be blood.
Yeah. We're out of time for tonight, though, unfortunately. But you can hang out with us on our social media server in the meantime at social.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. In addition to being one of the world's first cryptocurrencies, Dash was the first crypto project to have a decentralized autonomous organization that to this day continues to improve and promote Dash. Every month, 10% of the mining rewards go into a treasury. Anyone with one Dash to spend can put forward a proposal to the Dash masternodes to vote on. The masternodes vet the proposals and decide which ones move forward and are funded by the Treasury. In fact, that's exactly how we got this sponsorship. Nowadays, DAOs are plentiful, but Dash